Chapter 114. The surroundings suddenly quieted down, and the sound of the grass being blown by the wind could be heard clearly. Because it was best to ensure that the grass rat was alive when cutting the rat wood, they didn't kill it. The grass rat in the hand struggled. The rat wood on its body had been cut off, leaving a brown bald spot in its place. But in half a year, the bald spot would be covered by green hair again. Mai gave the person a look, and the person holding the grass rat bent down slightly, put the grass rat on the ground and let go. The grass rat that regained its freedom quickly rushed to the tall grass from before. After a slight rustling sound, the surroundings quieted down again, but the atmosphere was somewhat solemn. No one noticed the presence of ferocious beasts in the surroundings, but they could feel a dangerous aura. But they didn't know the specific location. The other party was very good at hiding, or else Mai wouldn't have missed it. The grass rat ran to the grass without hesitation, which meant that it was relatively safe in the grass. Half of the team focused on the opposite direction of the grass, while the others continued to pay attention to the surroundings. Whoosh, it sounded like the wind blowing. But there was only a light breeze around, and the wind wasn't strong enough to cause such a sound. Caesar's throat made a low growl, and at this moment everyone's nerves were tense. Whoosh, there was another small but rapid sound, as if something was flying quickly. It was close. The surrounding trees weren't dense, and Yangguang illuminated the forest brightly. A black shadow flashed under Yangguang. Over there. Mai rushed over, and at the same time another black shadow flashed by. In the past, the wild beasts and ferocious beasts in the forest would first attack the weakest in the team, and Xiao Xian would bear the brunt of it. He had experienced it for a whole year last year, and the other's first reaction was to protect Xiao Xian. But this time the other party charged straight at Caesar. Xiao Xian raised his saber and prepared to step forward to help Caesar block the attack. Unexpectedly, Caesar took the initiative to meet the attack. Within a short distance, Caesar instantly accelerated. His speed was almost pushed to the limit. Like a tightened and loosened bow, he shot out and collided directly with the flying creatures. Bang! Puff! The sound of collision and the sound of flesh being cut rang out. The two landed on the ground and started fighting. It was a creature that looked like a bat with a winged claw. Its wingspan was about 2 meters. It was probably bitten by Caesar, so it couldn't fly up immediately after landing. However, such a creature should only be active at night. Why would it come out in broad daylight? While the two were fighting, Xiao Xian threw a few spear darts at the bat-like creature. It was Caesar's first time encountering such a strong opponent in the wild, and it might not be able to deal with it easily. There were already a few scratches on its body. The stinging of the spear darts distracted the bat. Puff! The sound of flesh being forcefully torn was heard. The smell of blood spread. Caesar tore off one of the bat's wings. The sharp cry almost broke through the eardrums, and the sound waves made people dizzy. But soon, the cry came to an abrupt end because the bat's head was bitten off. Following Caesar's low growl, there were a few more puffs. The dead bat was bitten into a bloody mess. Only then did Caesar stop. Caesar, come here. Xiao Xian quickly stepped forward, intending to check on Caesar's injuries. However, just as he approached, Caesar, who had been staring at the dead bat with his head lowered, suddenly looked up at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian stopped in his tracks. He felt as if someone had poured a bucket of ice water over his head, making him feel cold. At this moment, Xiao Xian was looking at a pair of eyes filled with ferocious killing intent. The cold gaze seemed to tear everything around it into pieces. It was emotionless. In the wolf's open mouth, 4 of its fangs were stained with blood. Blood dripped down the fur around its mouth. Xiao Xian knew that at this moment Caesar's ferocious nature, which had been suppressed for 2 years, had awakened. Xiao Xian remembered the pack of wolves in the forest where the hunting ground was located. Caesar was similar to those ancient wolves. Even if he had been a cub, even if he had lived in the tribe for the past 2 years, even if Caesar had gotten along well with the people around him, the ferocious nature was still hidden in his body. It was only waiting for an opportunity to awaken again. Like a volcanic eruption. The longer he suppressed it, the more intense the eruption would be. Looking at Caesar, who was crouching beside the bat, Xiao Xian tightened his grip on the stone knife in his hand. If Caesar could not control his ferocious nature and attacked everyone, the hunting group would not spare him. Xian would stab him himself, and no one else would have to do it. After 2 years of raising him, it was impossible to say that he had no feelings for him. Over the past 2 years, he had grown from a cub that could be held with one hand to a wolf that was taller than himself. Many things had happened in between. From the cave to his own house, Xian had grown from a thin child to a totem warrior. Caesar had always been by Xian's side. However, at this moment both Xian and Caesar, who had lost his mind, had to make a choice. First, if he attacked the hunting group, Xian would stab him himself. Second, if he did not want to stay in the hunting group anymore, Xian would let him go for the sake of the past 2 years. Third, he could control his ferocious nature and come back. Xian put his free hand behind his back and made a gesture to the people who were on guard against Caesar, telling them not to move. His eyes were fixed on the wolf that was less than 10 meters away from him. Caesar, what will you choose? In fact, when he decided to bring Caesar out, Xian had thought about such a situation. Although he did not want to face it, if he stayed in the tribe and did nothing but eat and sleep, he would become everyone's food sooner or later. The shaman had given him a tattoo, but he could take it back. Here, a pet that only enjoyed a comfortable life was not allowed. He needed to prove his value. Blood flowed from the corners of the wolf's mouth, and its eyes were filled with killing intent. It stood there panting. Every time it breathed, it would carry the thick smell of the blood of this strange bat. However, looking at Xian, the wolf's murderous look gradually faded away, and his eyes became clear. Wiping the blood from his mouth, Caesar looked up at Xian, and then walked towards Xian. Lang Jie could not help but remind him. They were really frightened by Caesar's appearance. In the tribe, everyone said that Caesar was a wolf that had lost his spirit, and that he was useless. Many people said that Caesar should be eaten as food. However, what was wrong with Caesar just now? Lost his spirit? Bullshit. That murderous look made Lang Jie shiver, and he almost threw the spear in his hand at him. Useless? He even tore off the wings of that monster just now. How could he be called useless? Sure enough, a beast was still a beast. His ferocity was still there. Xian waved his hand behind his back again, telling Lang Jie and the others not to make a move for now. Caesar lifted his foot and slowly walked towards Xian. His wolf claws were still stained with blood. Every step he took, he left a bloody footprint. His fur was also stained with blood when he tore off his wings, making him look even more ferocious. 8 meters. 5 meters. 3 meters. Xian looked at the wolf that was getting closer and closer. His eyes were calm, but his heart was beating faster. He stretched out the hand behind his back, but the other hand was still holding the stone knife, ready to deal with any changes. Caesar panted as he slowly walked in front of Xian. He looked at Xian, then lowered his head, as if he knew that he had done something wrong. He lowered his ears and rubbed his head against Xian's outstretched palm. The moment his palm touched the wolf's head, Xian let out a long breath and put down his hand that was holding the stone knife. As usual, Xian would rub Caesar's head after completing the task successfully. Well done. Caesar's head swayed along Xian's hand. He even stuck out his tongue and licked Xian's hand, getting some bat blood on Xian's hand. Xian, are you okay now? Lang Jie stuttered. Caesar looked the same as usual, but after what happened just now, he didn't dare to approach him. He didn't put down the spear in his hand. I'm okay now. Xian knew that the others in the hunting group would have to guard against Caesar for a while, but he knew that it would get better gradually. After this incident, Caesar's ferocity came back, but it was good that he could control himself. Pulling Caesar aside, Xian checked the claw marks on his body. He took out some powder that he made to treat external injuries and sprinkled it on the wounds. He wanted to see if it would work. After Xian pulled Caesar aside, Lang Jie and the others walked over to check the dead bat. The other one had been killed by Mai. That one was bigger than the one Caesar killed, with longer and sharper claws. If Caesar had fought against that one, he would have been badly injured. Why did these things come out in the daytime? Another older warrior in the hunting group asked. Is it the same as last year's Thornblack Wind? It also came out in the daytime. Someone asked. No, it's not the same. Mai shook his head. The thorn black wind came out to take revenge on us. But why did these things come out? I've been hunting for so many years, and I've only seen them a few times. The group fell into silence. They were not afraid of these creatures. In fact, these two were not very powerful in the forest. But they were afraid that there might be some trouble behind them. Every abnormal situation in the forest could be a sign of something big. While they were in silence, they suddenly heard a few whistles. All the members of the hunting group were here, but no one blew the whistle. Obviously, the whistles were not from their own group, but from other groups. You guys stay here. We'll go and have a look. Mai led a few people and rushed towards the direction where the whistles came from. After a while, Mai and the others came with 5 people. The 5 of them all had different degrees of injuries. They were from a hunting group that was close to Xiao Xian's hunting route. Last year, when Xiao Xian and Mao were chased away by the thorn black wind, Mai asked them for help. Seeing the bat that was killed by Mai on the ground, the leading man's face changed. You guys met it? Not just one, we met 2. Lang Jie and the others stepped aside, showing the one that was killed by Caesar. So you guys met it too? Mai looked at the man who came over. The man sighed, yeah, I don't know why these things should come out at night, but they run around during the day. Our group has been attacked many times. Oh right, we're here to ask you for a favor. While speaking, the man looked at Xiao Xian and Caesar, who was lying beside Xiao Xian. I heard that your wolf can find things by smell. Mai did not answer but looked at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian nodded and answered yes. It caught a grass rat just now. Lang Jie said. Although they were still on guard against Caesar, they could not help showing off to the other hunting groups. When they left the tribe, the other hunting groups often mocked them. We want to borrow it. The man did not care about Lang Ga's tone and said, what for? Mai asked. Looking for someone. Chapter 115. Among the group of people, the leading one was called Cha. He was about the same age as Mai, and was the second in command of the hunting group next door. He had a lot of authority in that hunting group and he was also quite powerful. Among the 5 people who came, Cha was the least injured one. Did you lose anyone? Mai asked in surprise. The hunting had just begun, and no one had gone missing. Obviously something was wrong. 3 of them went missing. When we were resting in the first location, the 3 of them went to fetch water, and then they never came back. Cha's voice was hoarse when he was talking. Obviously, this incident was a great blow to their hunting group. If something had happened to them during the hunting, it would be fine. But they went missing without any reason, and even their bodies could not be found. They were not willing to give up just like that. The place where they fetched water was also on the mountain, not too far from the cave. There were no dangerous ferocious beasts either. But we didn't see any of them until night fell. Chang brought some people to look for them, but they didn't find them. They only found some traces near the place where they fetched water, but it was not enough to find them. After that, we waited for half a day and we also searched everywhere, but we still didn't find them. But when we were looking for them, we saw a lot of these things. Cha rubbed his tired face and pointed at the bats on the ground. They attacked the hunting group on their own initiative, and it was daytime. There were more than 10 of them and a few of us were injured. Chung asked me to bring some people here to ask for your help, but I didn't expect that these things had already flown here. Xiao Xian listened to him, and noticed that Caesar next to him was a bit strange. He looked at his wound and found that it was not getting worse. The color of the blood was still healthy, but Caesar looked very tired. He was bitten, right? Cha said, after being bitten by those things, he will feel weak all over, but he won't die. Give him some of this. Cha handed Xiao Xian a root-like thing. Xiao Xian had learned about herbal medicine from the shaman for a long time, so of course he knew what it was. This kind of root could refresh one's mind, and could also cure some narcotic poisons. However, it was very difficult to find them in the hunting ground. Besides, Cha and the others didn't think highly of Caesar before they set off for the hunting trip. They even laughed at Mai for allowing Caesar to come with them. But now, Cha was actually willing to take him out. Seeing Mai, Lang Jie and the others looking at him, Cha said helplessly, I still need him to help me find people. That was true. Who asked you to laugh before? Now that you need help, you're looking for it, right? Lang Jie and the others really wanted to show off. But when they thought of what had happened, their hearts sank again. Disappearing without a trace, not even a trace of the person could be found. Just hearing about it made one shiver. They were not afraid of fighting ferocious beasts, but they were always nervous about the unknown. What did Chung say? Mai asked. Chung said that the person who fetched the water might have been bitten by those things. He couldn't fight back and might have been dragged away by those things. But there weren't many traces, so it's hard to find him. Cha looked at Caesar again, who was getting more and more energetic. I hope it can help. Xiaoxian checked the wounds on Caesar's body. After making sure there were no problems, he focused on the 2 dead bats. The saliva of these bats had a strong narcotic effect. Xiaoxian pried open their mouths with a stone knife, and found that their upper incisors were much bigger than the other molars, and their canine teeth were as sharp as knives. The wounds on Caesar's body were caused by these teeth. Creatures with teeth like these obviously ate flesh and blood. In addition, these bats had sharp claws, strong hind limbs, and a pair of big eyes. How is it? Can we go now? Cha was a bit anxious. The longer they stayed, the harder it would be to find them. He still didn't know how the hunting team was doing. Mai looked at Xiaoxian and saw Xiaoxian nodding, which meant that Caesar had recovered. Mai said, okay, let's go. The hunting team went back to the cave first and brought some stone tools just in case. Cha led them, but they didn't go up the mountain. Although it was less dangerous up there, they had to take a long detour. They were in a hurry and had to get there as soon as possible, so they chose the shortest route. On the way they met a few more bats like that and they killed them together. Be careful, guys. Scratches are not so bad, but bites are more important. I don't have enough medicine. Cha reminded them. There are less prey in the hunting ground. The giant antler deer and giant yak herds have all left their original places and run further away. Even the ferocious beasts are less. This is something that we have never seen before. Hearing this, everyone knew that it was not a good sign. If there were less prey, they might be taken away by other predators. The giant antler deer and giant yak herds might be moving away to avoid this dangerous place. However, even the ferocious beasts were less in the hunting ground. What could make them afraid? It's not a good thing. Lang Jie and the others whispered. They had a bad feeling when they saw those giant bats, and now they were even more sure about it. While they were walking, Xiaoxian suddenly heard some extremely sharp screeching sounds like sound waves. However, Lang Jie and the others beside him didn't react at all, as if they didn't hear it. The hair on Caesar's back stood up again, and he stared at the sky with vigilance. Cha, Mai and the other middle-level totem warriors, who were walking in the front, suddenly stopped. Mai made a hand gesture to the others, signaling them to be quiet and stay on high alert, while he listened carefully. It's them. Mai lowered his voice and said. Yes. Cha nodded, but their target now is not us. They must have found other prey. Mai, did you hear anything? Why didn't I hear anything? Lang Jie asked. You guys are not strong enough. Mai listened carefully, and then pointed to a direction. Go up the tree. Be careful and stay hidden. Let's observe the situation first. Since Caesar couldn't climb trees, Xiaoxian let him hide in the grass. Xiaoxian nimbly climbed up a big tree nearby, until he was high enough to see somewhere not far away. He found a thick branch with dense leaves and hid there. Looking up, he saw a tree civet standing on a branch diagonally above him. At this moment, the tree civet was tense all over, with its hair standing up. Its mouth was wide open, and its eyes were filled with fear. This kind of vigilance and fear was not directed at Xiaoxian, but at those creatures in the sky that were approaching. However, just when it was vigilant, Xiaoxian suddenly jumped up, scaring it and making it almost fall from the branch. The tree civet's round eyes stared at Xiaoxian for a while, and after confirming that Xiaoxian was not a threat for the time being, it bared its teeth at Xiaoxian and threw an unfinished arthropod in its claws at Xiaoxian, as if it was angry that Xiaoxian scared it. Xiaoxian tilted his head, avoiding the insect that was thrown at him. The insect hit the tree trunk directly, but a few drops of green liquid splashed out and landed on Xiaoxian's face. Xiaoxian expressionlessly wiped the insect's liquid off his face and cursed in his heart, "Tree civet, this little thing really has a bad temper." However, Xiaoxian would not be angry with it over such a small matter. Suddenly, the tree civet turned its head and looked in a direction. That was where Mai had pointed just now. Xiao Xian, like the others, hid in the branches and looked through the gaps between the leaves. The surroundings were very quiet, but there was a sense of fear. On a patch of grass not far ahead, four-toothed deer stood there, facing 4 directions, their ears erect and their eyes alert. Whoosh! A black shadow flashed in the sky and landed on the grass. There was more than one bat. There were 11 bats that landed, and they surrounded the 4-toothed deer in the middle. For most bats, it was very difficult for them to move on the ground. Even if they could move, it was very slow. However, these bats folded their wings after landing, leaving behind a pair of powerful long legs and forearms. Any one of these 11 bats was bigger than the one that Mai had killed. After the 11 bats landed near the toothed deer, they quickly ran towards it. The toothed deer wanted to jump out of the encirclement, but as soon as it jumped, it bumped into a big bat that had jumped up as well. A big bat was knocked a few meters away. It rolled on the grass and got up again, continuing to attack the toothed deer. Its sharp teeth were like razors, biting off a piece of the toothed deer's skin. The smell of blood started to spread. After being bitten, the toothed deer's movement became slower and slower. They did not manage to escape at first, and now it was even more impossible. All 4 of the toothed deer were bitten, and one of them even started to feel weak in the legs. Those bats did not take the chance to continue to bite, but waited patiently. When the last toothed deer finally fell to the ground, they did not start to enjoy the delicious meal immediately. Instead, 2 or 3 of them worked together to grab the toothed deer that had lost its ability to move. They spread their wings and flew away. After those bats left, the hunting group gathered under the tree. Everyone's expression was not very good. They didn't seem to want to eat their prey immediately. Mai said. Cha's face was gloomy. That's why Chang said to find the missing people as soon as possible. At least after seeing what those things did. As long as they were not eaten immediately, the missing people might still be alive. They seem to be hoarding food, but the winter is over. A slightly older warrior in the group said. Then who are they going to feed these food to? The group fell into silence. Let's find the missing people first. Cha sighed. When Cha led Mai and the others to the first location of their hunting group, and met up with the leader of the hunting group, Chang was applying medicine to the wounded. What happened? Were you attacked again? Cha hurried a few steps forward to check on the wounded. Fortunately, none of them are seriously injured. Chang stood up and walked towards Mai. Finally, a smile appeared on his bitter face. You guys are finally here. Chang glanced around, and his sight fell on Caesar, who was standing beside Xiao Xian. I didn't expect that we would have to rely on him this time. While the 2 hunting group leaders were exchanging information, Xiao Xian was observing the situation in the cave. The warriors in the hunting group, who were still in high spirits when they set off, were now all listless, probably because of the mysterious disappearance of their companions, and the possible big crisis. Everyone had injuries on their bodies. Fortunately, most of them were scratches and only a few had been bitten. The most fortunate thing is that I didn't bring those brats with me this time. Otherwise, Chang didn't continue. If there were any newly awakened young warriors in the team, they would definitely be the ones to be attacked the most. Just like Xiao Xian last year, the newly awakened young warriors did not have much hunting experience. If they were not careful, they would die. Xian, it's up to you and Caesar now, Chang said. Chapter 116. There was still some time before nightfall. In order to find the missing people as soon as possible, the team leader immediately let Xiao Xian out to have a look. I want to know, after they left the cave, did they go directly to the place where they fetched water? Chang said to Xiao Xian. Although he knew that the missing people went to fetch water, Chang still wanted to ask Caesar for help to make sure. Okay, Xiao Xian answered. When they were in the cave, Xiao Xian asked someone to bring the items used by the missing people, and let Caesar smell them. Therefore, Caesar remembered the scents of the 3 missing people. Chang and Mai led about 10 people each and went out with Xiao Xian. We tried to follow those things, hoping to find their nest. However, after following them for a few times, we found that their caves were all different. Said Chang. Cha went to ask Mai for help. Firstly, he wanted to borrow Caesar to try to find the missing people. It would be best if he could find out which cave the missing people were taken to. Secondly, no matter whether he could find the missing people or not, they had lost 3 people all of a sudden. The current situation was still a bit strange, so they had to ask for help in advance. And the people they asked for help were naturally Mai's team, which was the closest to the hunting route. Chang sighed and looked at Wolf, who was walking in the front. Caesar walked in front of the team, walking and sniffing. After leaving the cave, they were indeed on the way to the place where they fetched water. However, on the way Caesar stopped. After observing Caesar's reaction, Xiaoxian said, "One of them went that way." Chang looked at the direction Xiaoxian pointed, and shook his head. "There is no cave, no forest, and no water there. We don't usually go there. We didn't look carefully over there," said Cha. Chang stayed silent for a few seconds and said, "Let's go to the place where they fetched water first." There was only one person who left halfway, but all 3 of them were missing. What happened to the other 2 who went to the water point? The place where Chang and his hunting group got water was a natural pond, which was near the mountainside, not too far away from their first stronghold, the cave. "We usually come here to fetch water, at least 3 people at a time. There are no dangerous beasts on the mountain. Even if we encounter one, we can escape smoothly. I've come here to fetch water several times, but it's different this time." Cha pointed at the grass under his feet. There were some marks on the grass, probably from when the missing person fell to the ground. A lot of the grass was crooked. There were knife and claw marks on a stone beside it. The knife marks belonged to the missing warrior. The claw marks were similar to the claws of the bats, and they were even bigger than the bats he had seen before. If the missing warrior was taken from the air, then it was no wonder that the hunting group couldn't find him, because there were no other useful clues on the ground. However, after being taken away from the sky, even Caesar, who had a much more sensitive sense of smell than humans, found it difficult to continue searching. "Let's go take a look at that," Chang said with some disappointment. That was the only way. The group turned back and returned to the place where the 3 warriors separated. Here 1 warrior had left. Caesar carefully identified the smell and led the group to walk. At first they were only at the mountainside, but then they walked up the mountain. "I remember that there are a lot of rocks in that area, and it's not easy to walk. We only came here once a long time ago," said Cha. Chang looked around and said, "Sometimes there are some mountain antelopes here. There's the smell of blood," Cha suddenly said. Not only Cha, but Mai and the others also smelled it. However, the wind was a bit messy here, so it was hard for them to identify it accurately. The group continued to follow Caesar until they reached the side of the rock, where there was a dead body of a mountain antelope. There were many bite wounds on the body of the mountain antelope. Judging from the marks, they were caused by those giant bats. There were blood stains on the ground, but not much. Most of the blood was sucked up by those bats. If they hadn't followed Caesar here, it would have been very difficult for the hunting group to find this place. After all, they rarely came here before, and they would never have thought that the person who went to fetch water would come here. "He must have heard the noise, so he followed us here," said Cha. The one who followed them here was the strongest one among the 3 who went to fetch water. Maybe he didn't expect that he would run into those bats who were chasing after their prey in a place like this on the mountain, and that he himself was killed and disappeared without a trace. "The food that has been eaten won't be taken away." "The food that has been taken away hasn't been eaten yet," said Mai. "It was better to disappear than to find a dead body. At least there was a chance that the person was still alive." The group turned their eyes to Caesar and saw that Caesar was sniffing the ground nearby. Then he walked towards one direction for a while and sniffed the ground again. After that, he looked at Xiaoxian. "It seems that Caesar has found something," said Xiaoxian. "Is there something on the ground?" Cha walked over quickly and dipped his finger in some dirt in front of Caesar. He put it under his nose and sniffed carefully. He frowned because there was indeed a smell. "What is this smell?" "Probably it's those things' urine." Xiaoxian gave his guess. "Their urine?" "Yes. Those things ate too much, so they excrete more water to make their bodies lighter and easier to fly," Xiaoxian said. Hearing Xiaoxian's words, Mai and Cheng all nodded. They felt that it made sense. With such a clue, the group was refreshed, and they continued to follow Caesar. After walking out of this rocky area, there weren't many trees around. After walking for a while, they approached the place where they fetched water, but they didn't go there. Instead, they kept moving forward. Those things urinated all the way? Asked Cha. Probably all along the way, but there is also the smell of people here. Xiao Xian said according to Caesar's reaction. What do you mean? Cheng looked at Xiao Xian. In other words, the people who were caught might have been urinated all over. Xiao Xian said. They were soaked in urine, and the warriors who fetched the water were all wearing furry animal skins that could absorb some water and drip it down along the road. That warrior was really unlucky. He went out of the cave to fetch water, but not only was he caught by the bats, he was also urinated all over. But because of that, there were continuous clues left behind. The group followed Caesar and walked on the mountain. Sometimes the smell was interrupted, so they had to expand the search area. Looking at the sky, Mai was a bit worried. If we keep searching, we might not be able to get back before dark. We don't know if there are any caves around. We rarely came here before, but those things have quite a lot of caves. We followed them and found a lot of caves on this mountain. Said Cheng. Where are there caves? Asked Xiao Xian. Cheng raised his hand and pointed in a few directions. Those places are not on our hunting route, so we are not familiar with many places. Caesar had already stopped. The smell was interrupted again. This time they might not be able to continue. What should we do? Cha looked around. They were on a mountain that was not very high. There were no trees around, only a patch of grass on the ground. They could see everything around them and could not see anything unusual. Xiao Xian stood there. He felt that the totem in his mind was active. He looked at the others and found that they did not seem to be in the same situation. Xiao Xian carefully observed the direction where the flame on the totem was floating. He looked in that direction and found that it was the top of the mountain. Because it was not high, there was no snow, only a patch of grass. Xiao Xian walked towards that direction. Mai and the others thought that Xiao Xian had determined the direction according to Caesar's behavior, so they followed him. As they got closer to the top of the mountain, the totem in Xiao Xian's mind became more active. In addition, Xiao Xian also heard some sounds like the sound of air flowing rapidly, similar to the sound of magnified breathing. Uncle Mai, what did you hear? Xiao Xian asked. No, I think I heard it. It was the cry of those things, but it was not clear. It should be too far away. Said Mai. I heard it too. Chong quickened his steps and ran towards the top of the mountain. The cry of bats? Xiao Xian frowned. No, it could not be. What he heard was not the cry of bats. Chong, who had run to the top of the mountain ahead of the others, suddenly stood there, motionless, as if he had seen something incredible. What did you find? Mai and the others also quickened their steps, and stood on the top of the mountain after a few jumps. Just like Cheng, the others were also stunned. In front of them, there was a huge pit with a diameter of more than 100 meters and a depth of more than 80 meters. The inner wall of the pit was not as barren as the other parts of the mountain. It was like another world inside. A few thigh-thick vines were intertwined and extended downwards, with huge umbrella-like leaves spreading out. The inner wall of the pit was also filled with all kinds of plants, some of which were even blooming and bearing fruit. This place is, Cheng had never come here before, so he did not know there was such a huge pit here. When they were chasing those things, they had never walked to the top of the mountain. Xiao Xian stood on the edge and looked down. It was still bright, and there was enough light to see the bottom of the pit. However, compared to the inner wall of the pit, there were fewer plants at the bottom of the pit. There were only some unknown kinds of grasses, which were monotonously distributed there. The totem in his mind was unusually active, and the flames around the horns were dancing. Something was attracting him down there. There are quite a few precious herbs down there, some of which I have only seen on the animal skin rolls in the shaman's place. Xiao Xian said. Mai and Cheng looked at each other and said, let's go down and have a look first. You guys wait and see. Mai Jia, Cheng and the others went down along the vines to see if there was any danger in the pit. Xiao Xian, Lang Jie and the others were waiting on the top, and they would act according to the situation. Just like what Xiao Xian had said, there were many herbs growing well in the pit. Some of them were the ones they used to resist the bat's poison. There were quite a lot of them, which was a pleasant surprise for the hunting team. After looking around, Cheng made a gesture to the people above, indicating that they could come down, but they had to be careful, because there were still unknown dangers. There were some thorns on the vines, so they were not slippery. It was a good thing for everyone because it made it easier for them to move. Xiao Xian went down with the others, leaving only Caesar above. There were many medicinal plants around the inner wall of the pit, so they cut down the ones they knew that could be used in emergencies first. Xiao Xian did not pay attention to the rare plants around first. After landing at the bottom of the pit, he felt that the flames on his totem seemed to be excited. He looked down at his feet. It was a field of bat shit. Chapter 117. The smell was not good. There was a thick layer of bat feces on the ground. Some of them looked like they had been here for a long time while some were still fresh. It meant that there were bats here every day, but they were not here yet. Maybe they would come back at night. There were many big cracks on the inner wall of the pit, which were about 1 to 8 or 9 meters wide. Some sounds came from the cracks, which were the bats' cries that Mai and the others had heard before. Some of the bats' cries could be heard by everyone, while some were beyond the hearing ability of junior totem warriors. Only Mai and the other intermediate totem warriors could hear them, or maybe there were some sounds that even Mai and the others could not hear. The sound of the rapid airflow was there all the time, and it sounded every once in a while. It was very rhythmic, but only Xiao Xian could hear it. Although the sounds of bats could be heard coming from the wide cracks, they sounded a little far away. Because of this, Mai and the others allowed the people above the pit to come down. However, they also reminded them to be careful, and not to make too much noise. There were claw marks around the cracks, which were similar to the ones found on the rocks at the water point. Those big bats' hook-like claws could cling to the cracks of the rocks and move around flexibly. Chung, Cha said in a low voice. Cha found a stone knife on the ground around the cracks, which belonged to the missing warriors. It seems that they were indeed caught and brought here. They went in from here. Chung looked at the huge cracks that were several meters wide, and his eyes were vicious. He wanted to kill all those things. However, it was not a good time now. They brought too few people here while the enemies were too many. There were cracks around the inner wall of the pit, which reminded Cha of the caves they found in the mountains when they were tracking those things. Maybe those caves were connected to the cracks here. They did not know how long the cracks were, and where they extended to. They could only guess. But those things' abnormal behaviors were similar, so their guess was more than half true. Xiao Xian kept staring at the ground under his feet, and at the same time, he felt the direction of the totem flame in his mind. It was different from when they were outside the pit just now. At this moment, the flames on the totem did not face any direction. They only rolled and rolled very violently. The others more or less felt it, but it was not as obvious as Xiao Xian. They only thought that it was because they were too nervous in this place, and were on guard against possible dangers. They did not think that it was because of the totem. Xiao Xian lifted his feet and walked slowly. Xiao Xian did not walk very fast. Every step he took was very careful. The others thought that Xiao Xian was trying not to make any noise, but other than that, Xiao Xian was still feeling the changes that came with every step. Something had affected the totem. According to the totem's reaction, it was very similar to the item mentioned in the animal skin scroll that the shaman showed him. It could be on the inner wall of the pit, or it could be under his feet, or it could be in more than one place. However, the sinkhole was too big, and they still had to be on guard against the dangers that could appear at any time. It was impossible for them to carefully check every place. They could only roughly sense and see if they could determine the approximate location. 1 step, 2 steps, 10 steps. Suddenly Xiao Xian paused. It was here. Xiao Xian squatted down and used his stone knife to scrape away some of the bat feces on the surface, revealing the ground at the bottom of the pit. The ground below was very hard, much harder than ordinary stones. It was no wonder that there were so few plants. In the surrounding area, there were only a few scattered blades of grass. To be able to grow in such a place, the vitality of the grass was quite tenacious. The rocky ground was very hard. Xiao Xian tested the hardness of the ground a little. His teeth knife could dig out a piece of the stone surface. Xiao Xian did not care about the dirt. He put his hand on the ground and felt the source of the totem in his mind. It was not far. It was under his hand. He could dig it out easily, but that would cause a lot of noise. At this time Xiao Xian heard Caesar growling from above. "Uncle Mai, something is coming from the sky," Xiao Xian said. After warning Xiao Xian, Caesar quickly jumped under a leaf of the vines to hide. In this way, the thing flying from the sky would not easily find him. Hide! Mai and Chengdu ordered their warriors to quickly find a place to hide. The others did not need to say much. They all reacted quickly and found vines or other plants to hide. The 30 people quickly hid. From the outside, it was very difficult to find them. After a while, a sound came from the sky. Xiao Xian looked through the gaps between the leaves. There were a few brown and black bats flying down from the sky. They were very big. The smallest one had a wingspan of more than 5 meters. There were 2 of them together, catching the giant antlered deer. It seemed that they had attacked a herd of giant antlered deer. Previously, they had heard that the giant antlered deer herd had migrated from this place. But they did not know whether these bats had attacked another herd of giant antlered deer, or had directly chased and killed the one that had migrated. After flying down from above, they came to a wide stone gap. The bats flew in with their prey. One by one they disappeared into the dark stone gap. However, during the whole process, a dark brown bat with much thicker fur stopped outside the stone gap and looked into the pit. Compared to their vision, their sense of smell and hearing were actually more powerful. It did not see anything unusual, but it smelled something different. It opened its mouth, revealing sharp blade-like teeth. Its specialized nose moved, making sounds that most people could not hear. Then it suddenly used its strength to push off the stone wall, spread its wings, and flew like a gust of wind. Among the people who came over, the one who was hiding closest to it was there. They had been discovered. The people hiding there had to pick up their spears to defend themselves. This also meant that they could no longer hide here. They had to leave as soon as possible. The number of bats here was much greater than theirs. Go! Chang shouted in a low voice, indicating that everyone should leave quickly. Once these bats found people, they would call for other partners. Soon more bats would fly over. Now that they were few in number, they had to leave quickly. Xiao Xian ran to the place where he had just dug. His arms gathered strength and he waved his stone knife. The knife flashed and in a short moment, he had slashed several times. Bang! Bang! Stone chips flew everywhere. The thing below was also dug out. Holding it tightly in his hand, Xiao Xian did not care about anything else. He quickly stepped on the ground and retreated. He did not care about how much bat feces was on his trousers. He ran to the side of the vines and climbed up along the vines like an agile monkey. Just now, when Xiao Xian was digging, Mai heard the sound and looked over. What he saw made him so angry that smoke almost came out of his head. What the hell was wrong with Xian? Even if it was a rare herb, it was more important than his life? Instead of running for his life, he was digging. Fortunately, Xiao Xian's movements were fast. From digging to escaping along the vines, it took less than a breath's time. He did not fall behind the others. After getting out of the pit, Chang led the others and ran towards the cave of the first stronghold. Get out of here! A sharp cry came from the giant pit. Everyone heard it. When they looked back, they could not help but feel numb. In the sky above the giant pit, large bats were flapping their wings, and more were flying out. They were densely packed. They sped up and began to run for their lives. This time they did not go up the mountain. There were not many trees on the mountain, so they might as well go down the mountain. There they could lure some ferocious beasts to block the bats. Compared to the bats, they felt that the ferocious beasts in the forest were much more adorable. Of course, the species of ferocious beasts also depended on the species. If the ferocious beasts were the kind that would not cause trouble for the bats, but would hinder their escape, then they would be courting death. The bats chased them for a while. The hunting group was hiding and attracting the ferocious beasts to cause trouble. So they gave up and did not continue the chase. Even if they did not see the bats chasing after them, they did not stop until they reached the hunting area that they were familiar with. Then they slowed down. Here they needed to slow down and make sure that there were no bats following them. Otherwise, if the bats followed them to the cave of the first stronghold, then they would be in trouble. How is it? Mai looked at Chang, Cha and the others who were carefully observing the surroundings. They did not follow us. Chang answered. Then he looked at Caesar. Judging from the wolf's reaction, he did not seem to be in big trouble. Only then did everyone take a long breath. After counting the number of people and making sure no one was missing, Mai felt a little relieved. However, when he saw Xiao Xian, his anger was ignited again. Mai strode over and grabbed Xiao Xian's animal skin coat, and said angrily, "Do you want to die? What are you digging for? Do you know you were almost caught and eaten by them? I should have let you stay outside." It was rare for Mai to be so angry. He treated Xiao Xian as his own junior. When Xiao Xian had an accident last year, he regretted not paying more attention to him. Fortunately, Xiao Xian was safe and sound. But today Xiao Xian, who had been behaving well and obeying orders, actually did something like that. Under such an emergency situation, what was worth taking such a risk? Cha sat on the ground and panted. He shook his head and thought, "Luckily he is not from my team, or I would definitely beat him up." Xiao Xian, who was lifted up by Mai's coat, was also stunned. He had never seen Mai so angry since the first day he joined the hunting group. However, Mai was doing this for his own good. He was not scolding him but just caring about him. Lang Jie wanted to say something to comfort Mai, but as soon as he took a step forward, he was stared at by Mai. He smiled embarrassedly and did not dare to move forward. "What are you doing this for? What did you dig up? Take it out." If it were not for the situation, Mai would have roared out loud, "Sorry, I was too impulsive." Xiao Xian also knew that he was too impulsive. He had to calm down next time. As he said that, Xiao Xian reached out his fist, palm up, and slowly opened his fingers in front of Mai, revealing the thing in his palm. "It's just a..." Seeing the thing in Xiao Xian's palm, Mai suddenly thought of something. Before he could finish his sentence, he was stuck there, as if someone was choking his neck. His face turned red, and for a moment, he almost stopped breathing, as if he could not believe what he saw. Cha stood up and wanted to take a closer look. Unexpectedly, as soon as he stood up, he was pushed aside by Cheng, who walked quickly to him. Pushing aside the debris in front of him, Cheng stared at the red crystal in Xiao Xian's hand. His eyes were red like Mai's, but no one knew whether it was because he was too excited, or because of the light refracted by the small crystal. Fire crystal. Chapter 118. Is it a fire crystal? Cheng's voice trembled uncontrollably, unable to calm down. Mai slowly put down Xiao Xian and looked at the red crystal in Xiao Xian's hand. He wanted to reach out and take a look, but he was hesitant about something. Xiao Xian reached out his hand and flipped his palm, letting the crystal fall. Mai was afraid that he would be too slow, so he hurriedly caught it. He held it in his hand as if he was holding a treasure. He was nervous, excited, and in disbelief. All kinds of emotions were boiling and chaotic at the moment. He couldn't tell what he was feeling. When he touched it, he could feel a warm current flowing. This warm current could only be around the crystal and couldn't extend further, as if it was confined. The entire crystal was only the size of a quail egg. Its shape was irregular, and its surface was not very clean. There were even some stone chips on it. However, the light that shone down from the gaps between the leaves above was not very bright. When it shone on the red crystal, it was covered in a thick layer of red light and shadow. The leaves above were swaying with the wind, and the light shone down was also changing. It seemed that the light and shadow around the red crystal were flashing around it, like a dancing fire intoxicating people. Is it really a fire crystal? Cheng trembled and moved closer, wanting to take a look himself. Mai closed his hand and held it tightly in his hand. Seeing Mai like this, Cheng opened his eyes wide and the beard on his cheeks trembled. He said word by word, "You won't give it to me?" Cheng looked at Mai, as if he would kill him if he didn't show it to him. The muscles on Mai's face were also trembling. He didn't know what kind of expression he should make. The two of them stared at each other for a while before Mai slowly opened his finger. It was much slower than when Xiao Xian opened his finger, as if it was in slow motion. When he opened his finger, he emphasized, "This was discovered by our team." Cheng automatically omitted Mai's "our team found it," and took the red crystal from Mai's hand. It wasn't as cold as the other stones. Instead, it was warm. The fire crystal. It's really the fire crystal. Cheng held it in his hand and didn't want to return it. The fire crystal was an extremely precious stone for the tribesmen. It contained the energy needed by the totem warriors, and it could also help the totem warriors improve their strength. The way to absorb the fire crystal was special. It needed to be burned on the fire seed. Part of the burning energy was absorbed by the fire seed, and the other part was absorbed by the people around the fire pit. More than 20 years ago in Gigu's team, someone found a fire crystal a little bigger than a fingernail. At that time, more than 10 junior totem warriors were promoted to intermediate totem warriors overnight. Although several intermediate totem warriors were not promoted to senior totem warriors, the totem tattoos on their arms were closer to their wrists. A long time ago, one of the shamans had said that whoever found the fire crystal would have the priority to use it. No matter if you were from the mountain or the foot of the mountain, no one else could interfere. However, there was another point. It must be in the hunting group as a whole. Once it was found, it could be used by the hunting group, and their families could also benefit from it. No matter to Mai, Chang, or anyone in the tribe, this was very attractive. Have you seen enough? Give it back to us. This was found by our team. Mai wanted to grab it back, but Chang didn't want to give it back. Xiao Xian watched the two team leaders grab a stone regardless of the time and place. Weren't they afraid of attracting the bats and ferocious beasts by making such a big noise here? While the two were grabbing, Chang said, "Our team is also here. You are not the only one here. Don't try to take it all by yourself." Seeing the two team leaders like this, the warriors in the two teams also began to discuss. Some of them didn't know what the fire crystal was, but after being told by their teammates, they understood. They looked at Chang's clenched hands with burning eyes. The warriors in the tribe had a persistent desire for power. This desire made them willing to take any risk and face any crisis. The two sides were in a stalemate for a while. Suddenly, someone asked Xiao Xian, "Xian, where did you find the fire crystal?" Hearing this, the two team leaders stopped and looked at Xiao Xian. "It's in that big pit," said Xiao Xian. "I didn't want to fight with Chang. Anyway, Chang couldn't take it all by himself. Before you left, you were digging for the fire crystal?" Mai asked. "Yes. At that time I felt something under my feet. Felt good. Later, when I was running away, I didn't want to give up, so I dug it out." Xiao Xian said, "Sorry, I will be calmer next time." No. If it were me, I would be even less calm." Chung said at this time. If it were him, who felt the fire crystal under his feet, he would probably dig it out on the spot. However, this might not be noticed by everyone. After all, Xian was with the shaman. Everyone attributed Xiao Xian's discovery of the fire crystal to the shaman in their minds. As long as it was related to the shaman, they would believe it without question. At this time, Cha couldn't help but think, why wasn't he on our team? But soon everyone realized one thing. Cheng's breathing was a little messy. He tried to slow down his tone, and asked Xiao Xian, "When you were in the pit, did you feel the fire crystal in other places?" "Yes." Xiao Xian said affirmatively. When they were running away, they felt a few places, but they didn't have time to dig it out. As soon as Xiao Xian finished his words, the surroundings became silent instantly. Then there was the sound of rapid breathing. There were fire crystals. There was more than one fire crystal. And it was so big, boss. "Let's go dig for the fire crystal." "Yes, let's go." Cheng's team members were all anxious and couldn't wait to run back to the giant pit. Wait. Let me think about it first. Chang began to walk in circles, thinking about what to do. Even when he was walking in circles, he didn't loosen his clenched fists. Xiao Xian found that the people in the tribe seemed to like to walk in circles when they were excited. Every time he saw them walking in circles, Xiao Xian thought of the dog he raised in his previous life. Every time it pooped, it would walk in circles first. If I knew there were fire crystals there, I would have tried to get more, even if I had to fight with those things, Chang said. But now we are back, we have to think about it carefully. Yes, we have to prepare more, we can't rush. Although Mai said so, his tone was not much softer than Chang's. They were all thinking about the fire crystals. "Let's go back first," Chang said. "Okay, let's go." A group of people took stone swords and spears and planned to run away. "Which way are you going?" "I mean to go back to the cave of our first stronghold," Chang said while shaking his beard. A group of people became listless. Back to the cave of Chang's first stronghold, Mai finally got the fire crystals back from Chang, and told Xiao Xian that he would keep them for now. Xiao Xian didn't mind. Mai didn't mean to keep them all to himself. Besides, to enjoy the benefits of the fire crystals, they were all in small groups, so no one could miss out. Mai and Chang, who were more powerful in the hunting group, gathered together to discuss. Because it was Xiaoxian who found them, they also asked Xiaoxian to join them. After a night of discussion, the two group leaders finally decided to call the other 3 hunting groups. When Xiaoxian said that there were more fire crystals, he thought that if Ma Yanchang wanted to keep them all to themselves, he would stop them and refuse to help. Only they might not be able to eat that big piece of meat. After calming down, everyone knew that it was impossible for the 2 hunting groups to fight against those giant bats. Besides, there were wounded people in the hunting group, so they were not in good condition. Ma Yanchang took out the animal skin roll and wrote a few words to the other 3 hunting group leaders in the name of their own hunting group. As for whether they would come or not, it was up to them. However, as long as they weren't stupid, they would come without arrest. Now everyone should still be in the first stronghold. They haven't gone far. We can still find them if we go there quickly. Ma Yanchang each sent a few people to deliver the letter to the other 3 hunting groups. And those who stayed in the cave, the wounded ones hurried to recover, and those who were not wounded went out to hunt those giant bats that attacked everywhere. They killed every single one of them. Before, they all avoided the bats, but now, since they knew it was related to the fire crystals, their attitude was different. Every day, they rushed out with stone swords and spears, as if they had been injected with chicken blood. After receiving the letter, the other 3 hunting group leaders responded quickly. The fastest one came the next day, and the slowest one came the morning of the 3rd day. They brought the whole hunting group with them. They couldn't finish their hunting routes this time, but no one had any objection. Even the ancestors would crawl out and raise both hands to agree. Every member of the hunting group came here willingly, and one was more anxious than the other. They were afraid that they couldn't get a share of this big meat. 5 hunting group leaders jointly made a decision that the main goal this time was to encircle and hunt the giant pit. Before that, they had to figure out the countermeasures. Before the 5 hunting group leaders figured out the countermeasures, the members of the 5 hunting groups were in a state of high spirits every day. When they heard about the abnormal situation, all the uneasiness, anxiety, fear, and uncertainty were thrown far away. Now they were sharpening their swords, thinking about how to kill more bats every minute. The person who was bitten was lying in the cave to recover. Half asleep, he got up in a daze and staggered to walk in an S shape. His voice was not clear. "Let me go. I can still kill more." His teammates smiled apologetically to the others in the cave, and then walked over to pull him back. Yes, you can still kill more." Then with a punch, he knocked the man out, dragged him to the side, and left him there to recover quietly. After that person settled his teammates, he turned around and saw that everyone was looking at him. He said innocently, "Our boss said that there isn't enough medicine. The people who were bitten will be fine after taking some medicine and sleeping. They will also recover their strength." The 5 hunting groups all gathered in the cave that became their first stronghold. It was a little crowded, but it didn't matter. Everyone was full of hope now. Everyone was looking forward to being promoted as soon as possible. Mai and the others were looking forward to being closer to advanced warriors. In normal times, they could enjoy relatively less resources. Most of them lived at the foot of the mountain. They were more ambitious for themselves and for the next generation. As for the advanced group, well, the advanced group was too far away to find them. Chapter 119. Every day, the 5 teams would send people to the mountain where the giant pit was located to investigate the situation. However, there was still no news about the 3 people who had been captured. The scouts had been observing from a distance, but they could not enter the bat cave. There were bats flying around the cave, much more than those around the giant pit. 7 days had passed, and according to everyone's judgment, the chances of the 3 people still alive were very small. However, because it was related to the fire crystals, and now it was a joint effort of the 5 teams, they could not act rashly without preparation. In that case, they would lose not only 3 people but also 3 teams. However, many prey were caught in the cave, but nothing was thrown out. A man who had just returned from his investigation said, "Those bats would not take away the prey they had eaten outside, nor would they finish it. Most of the time they preferred fresh blood. Once the blood ran out, they would lose interest in the prey." During these 7 days, Xiaoxian went to the giant pit again, accompanied by the top warriors of the 5 teams. This time he was more careful. Xiao Xian carefully checked several places. Only one was close to the surface, and the other places needed to be dug deeper. The fire crystals closest to the surface were dug out, and of course, those big bats in the stone crevices were alarmed and chased for some distance. But strangely, last time they chased for a long distance. If the hunting team had not caused some trouble, they would not have been able to get rid of them. But this time, Xiao Xian found that those bats gave up earlier and stopped chasing after a short distance. It seemed that for them the hunting team was just a small matter, and they did not need to worry about it. It was speculated that the bats had slowly gathered in the mountain where the giant pit was located, and all the bats in this area had gone there. Fortunately, most of them were not very intelligent, and could only be regarded as fierce beasts. Xiao Xian wanted to make some big nets to catch the bats, but he did not have suitable materials to make them, so he gave up. With those bats' sharp claws and razor-like teeth, they could easily break vines and grass nets. In the end, the 5 leaders decided to smoke them out. There were less than 200 people in the 5 small teams, but there were thousands of large bats in the mountain. Moreover, according to the information from the observers, there were still more bats joining in. Fortunately, not every one of them was the same size as the ones they encountered in the sinkhole that day. Many of them were about the same size as the one that attacked Caesar. He could deal with one by one, but if there were too many of them, it would still be troublesome. Now the goal of the hunting team was to dig out the fire crystals, find the missing people, and try their best to avoid direct confrontations with those bats. No matter which one it was, the bats had to be chased away first. Smoking was undoubtedly a good idea. For the people in the hunting group, they would often use some smoky plants during hunting, for example, to get rid of insects, to repel wild beasts, and so on. This time, everyone decided to try using the smoke method first. Smoke plants had to be carefully selected. If they didn't smoke the bats, they would smoke their own people to death. That would be bad for their teammates. The 5 small team leaders compared several plants that were often used for smoking and selected the one with the most obvious effect. Those things seemed to hate the smell very much. I threw a small ball at them yesterday and they ran away directly. Lang Jie said proudly. Yesterday, Lang Jie encountered a few bats that were hunting. They were about to succeed, but Lang Jie threw a smoking ball of grass at them, and it fell right next to the prey. The prey had already lost its ability to move, and could not run away. Those bats, who were eager to enjoy the delicious meal, screamed and flapped their wings to leave after the smoke from the grass ball dispersed. They were very displeased with the smell of the grass ball. That's great. In this way we have a higher chance of success, Mai said. In addition to choosing the smoky plants, they also had to prepare some herbs, in case they were bitten and fainted or got smoky. They didn't hate the smell of the smoky grass, but it was unbearable after a long time. At Xiao Xian's suggestion, people in the hunting group weaved a kind of refreshing rattan grass into masks. They would wear the masks when they entered the cave. The refreshing smell of the rattan grass could make people more awake after being smothered by the smoke. Boss, when can we set off? Someone in the cave asked. Now they had to fight for the food they ate every day from those bats. In the surrounding area, many wild animals and ferocious beasts had left, so it was difficult to find suitable food. They also had to guard against the bats. Soon, Cheng said. Stone tools, herbs, and other necessary items were all prepared. It was time to start. Xiao Xian sat on the side, listening to them talking about the upcoming action. He looked at his hand. In his hand there was a small piece of red crystal, which was dug out when they went to the giant pit for the second time. There were 2 small pieces of fire crystal near the surface. One was taken away by Cheng for safekeeping, and the smaller one was kept by Xiao Xian. This small piece of fire crystal was a little bigger than a grain of rice, and much smaller than the one they dug out the first time. Therefore, the other leaders didn't show any objection to Xiao Xian keeping this piece of fire crystal. In their opinion, the giant pit was the most important thing. Feeling the warm current from his hand, Xiao Xian was very confused. Mai and the others had said that the energy in the fire crystal could only be absorbed after the fire seed was burned. However, since the first time he held the fire crystal, Xiao Xian had absorbed a little energy from it. It was not much, but it was obvious. This time he wanted to keep one for himself just to make sure. In the sea of consciousness, he could see traces of red lines, gathering on the totem and merging with it. Even though this piece of fire crystal was small, the energy it contained was far beyond Xiao Xian's expectation. If he used another vision ability in his body, Xiao Xian could see that the fire crystal in his hand was burning, and the red energy released by the burning made a curve in the air, and then drilled into his palm, arm, or other parts of his body, and finally gathered in the totem. 2 days later, the 5 hunting groups started to move. The assigned work had been done, and everyone was in charge of their own duties. Xiao Xian followed Mai and the others to a bat cave. At first, they planned to enter directly from the gap in the giant pit, but after some discussion they decided against it. It was difficult to hide in the giant pit, and the bats were much larger there, so they could be easily discovered. Compared to that, the bat caves in other parts of the mountain were much easier to deal with. The bats there were easier to deal with, and there were places for them to hide. The gap in the mountain should be connected to the other caves. Let's go in from one of them first. Mai said to his men. Everyone was wearing masks made of vines. It was not very comfortable, but it was useful. The cool smell of the vines calmed them down a lot. Looking at the direction of the wind, Mai signaled everyone to start moving. Some of them hid in the grass and covered their bodies with grass. Others brought the smoke grass and approached the cave. They were holding some thin and long spears in their hands, all made of wood, with bundles of smoke grass tied to the spearheads. They lit the fire, and when the fire was almost done, they put it out. Suddenly, thick smoke rose from the spearheads. Shoot! The thin and long spears were thrown out like arrows, flying towards the bat cave in front of them. One by one, everyone had dozens of spears tied with smoke grass. Within a few breaths, all of them were accurately thrown into the bat cave. Soon the bat cave was filled with thick smoke. Choosing the bat cave was also based on the direction of the wind, and the one in front of them was blowing into the cave. A small part of the smoke in the cave was blown out, but most of it was blown into the deeper part of the cave. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Sharp sounds came from the cave, and Lang Jie and the others could hear them. They saw the smoke coming out of the cave, which meant that the bats inside were flapping their wings towards the outside. The people who threw the spears immediately got ready. Whoosh, whoosh. Bats flew out of the cave quickly, and hundreds of them came out in a blink of an eye. The bats that were forced out of the cave were flying around outside, and some of them were screaming angrily. They looked around and saw a group of people standing there. Squeak, sharp screams were heard, and a group of bats that were forced out of the cave flew towards the people who threw the spears. Run! The people who threw the spears were the fastest in the hunting team. They ran away as soon as they saw the bats coming. In the direction they were running there was a gray area. A former hunting group had been there once, and they knew that there was a group of giant spiders in the woods there. Plus, that gray area was not on their hunting route, so the hunting group would not go there on normal days. But now they were going to use those giant spiders. They would lure the bats there, and let the bats fight with the giant spiders. When the bats left, the people hiding outside the cave came out and walked into the cave. They did not forget to throw some smoke grass at the entrance of the cave. According to common sense, the bats should be hiding in the cave on a sunny day like today, when the sun was shining brightly. But it was not the case. Some of the bats had gone out long ago. Some of them just went out and some of them flew deeper into the cave. There were not many left in the cave. These bats were not difficult to deal with. Mai and his men killed the bats one by one with torches. These bats had big eyes, but in this dark cave they were not very useful. They relied more on their sensitive sense of smell and hearing. The people in the hunting team were wearing thick leather shoes. Many of them were not used to wearing shoes, so they were forced to wear them before the mission. The bat feces in the cave had accumulated into a thick layer, and there were some small insects crawling in the bat feces. Puff! Lang Jie stabbed a crawling insect in half with his spear, and frowned. This place stinks. Mai did not say anything. He took the torch and led his men deeper into the cave. While killing the bats, they also threw out some smoke grass. The other 4 hunting teams, like Mai and his men, had also entered the cave. They had to hurry up, in case of any unexpected changes. Everyone endured the stench in the cave and the smell of smoke grass, and quickly walked deeper into the cave. The inside of the cave was not flat. There were protruding rocks everywhere, and some of them were very sharp. If it were not for the light of the torches, They would not be able to move. Before, everyone had guessed that the crevices in the mountain were connected to the other bat caves. But soon, the 5 hunting teams all heard the voices of others. Sure enough, it is connected. Chapter 120. After walking out of the caves, the 5 hunting groups gathered together. In front of them there was a very wide cave and they couldn't see the top. And in front of them it was like a dense fog. They thought that some bats would be forced to hide here by the smoke, but they didn't expect that there would be no bats in this wider area. Maybe they ran to other caves, but it shouldn't be that there were no bats here. Why? What was so special about this place? They couldn't figure it out. How's it going on your side? I asked the other hunting group leaders. Not bad. Not many bats are left in the caves, and they are not hard to deal with. Same with our side. It seems that most of them are out. This was a good sign. Something is coming, Cha suddenly said. There were more than 5 bat caves outside, and there were other caves that also led to this place. Should we put out the torches? No, it's useless to put out the fire. Wait, there are only 2 coming. Chang made a gesture to the others. The sound of flapping wings was very clear in the quiet cave. Soon, everyone heard the sound of bats flying out from another cave. Whoosh! Whoosh! Although they couldn't see the faces of the 2 bats clearly, they could tell where they were by their hearing. Mai and the others threw the long spears at the 2 bats as soon as they came out. Puff! The 2 bats only uttered a few short syllables, and then fell to the ground. He asked the others to throw the smoke grass into the other caves, and then Chang stepped forward to check on the bats and the prey they caught. The 2 bats had been pierced like hedgehogs, and the cow they caught was also affected, with a few spears on its body. But the cow was still alive, just unconscious. Just like the other prey, the bats only made them unconscious, but didn't kill them directly. Look at the direction they are flying that way. Everyone looked at the direction Chang was pointing at, but they couldn't see clearly even with the help of the torches. It was like a dense fog. Will they? Cha looked at the foggy area in front of him and said, the prey caught by the bats was sent there, so were the 3 missing people in the hunting group sent there? Also, they came here to find out the reason for the bats' abnormal behavior. If they could figure it out, they could solve the problem from the root. Otherwise, they would have to risk being chased by the bats every time they needed to dig for the fire crystals. The reason for the bats' abnormal behavior was probably because of that. The 5 team leaders had once analyzed the situation and felt that the bats were probably preparing food for a leader. This phenomenon was common among many animals. This possibility was extremely high. If that was the case, they would do everything they could to kill that leader. Was the leader inside? If he killed their leader, would the bats disperse? Let's go and take a look. Be careful, Chung warned everyone. As soon as they entered the area shrouded in fog, the torches in their hands became much smaller. The visibility was very low, and there was an extremely unpleasant smell in the surroundings, as if there was a heavy fog. Miasma? Xiaoxian was puzzled. The smell that assailed their nostrils made them feel dizzy. It was not the stench of the bat cave, but a smell that made them dizzy. Fortunately, the smell of the rattan grass eased this feeling. Putting a piece of the herb into their mouths, the bitter taste of the herb made everyone feel refreshed. The sound of wings flapping could be heard again. This time there were more of them. After all, the effects of the smoke grass were limited. There were more than 10 bats flying in from other caves, all of them with prey in their hands. Mai and the others had planned to kill them by throwing their spears, but unexpectedly, the bats did not attack the hunting team. They did not even look at them. Instead, they grabbed their prey and flew into the area shrouded in fog. Somewhere in the fog came the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. Not long after, those bats flew out of the fog and flew back into the cave. Their leader must be in there, Chung said in a low voice. The deeper they went, the smaller the flames of the torches became, as if they could not burn any longer. Due to the influence of the thick fog, even Mai could only see within 10 meters with a torch, not to mention the others. This place. Before Cha could finish his words, he kicked something under his feet. His nerves tightened all of a sudden, and he was ready to fight. But soon, he found that the object under his feet did not have any breath of life. Dead. Cha kicked the object under his feet. What Cha kicked was the dead body of a bat. And this bat had been dead for a long time. Not only under Cha's feet, but also in the surrounding area shrouded in fog, there were bat skeletons everywhere. That was to say, there were bat corpses everywhere. In some places, there were even several layers of them. It was a little scary. As they went further, the bat corpses piled up thicker and thicker, like a small hill. Dead bats. All of them were dead bats. And many of them died in a miserable way. Their bodies were incomplete, and they were cruelly torn off before they died. No wonder those bats in the cave did not come here. This place was simply a bat graveyard. Every one of them is huge. They have been dead for a long time. Chang said after looking at the few bats on the ground. Look at the traces left on their bodies. Seems that they killed each other. Why would they kill each other? I remember that in some groups of beasts to choose a leader they have to fight each other. Mai said. You mean, their leader is really here? Everyone suddenly became nervous. If these bats were all alive, with such a large number and body size, the 5 small leaders would not dare to bring people here directly. And with so many bats, what kind of ferocious beast would emerge as the winner? Even so, no one had any intention of retreating. In fact, when they were discussing with Mai and the others, Xiao Xian had proposed to go back to the tribe to find reinforcements. After all, the hunting had just begun, and they were all in the first stronghold. It would be faster for them to find reinforcements than the advance group. Moreover, if they went back to the tribe, they could find more reinforcements which would be safer. However, Xiao Xian's proposal was rejected by the others. First, it was because of the competition between the 2 hunting groups. The 5 small leaders did not want the other hunting group to participate, and did not even want them to know the news. Second, the more people participated, the less each person would get. No one wanted that. Xiao Xian's idea was that where there is life, there is hope. But the others thought that for the fire crystals they would rather die. That was what the tribesmen thought. At first, Mai had scolded Xiao Xian, "What is more important than your life?" But then everyone became extremely crazy. Xiao Xian underestimated this kind of craziness. So when the 5 small leaders were discussing the plan, he knew that these people were really going to risk their lives. As they continued to move forward, they could still hear the bats carrying prey in the air. None of the bats cared about the people in the mist. They were minding their own business. Bang! Another sound of prey falling to the ground. The place where the prey fell was very close to the people in the hunting group. Wait! Chung whispered. Breathing. Mai and the others also noticed it. There were a lot of breathing sounds around. Except for the warriors in the hunting group and the bats in the air, there were many other living creatures breathing. But every breath was very weak. Like climbing a mountain, they stepped on the thick dead bodies of the bats and continued to move forward. The fire of the torches was very weak. It had shrunk to 1/5 of its original size. Their vision was severely limited. Now they could only rely on their hearing to understand what was happening around them. Some junior totem warriors couldn't hold on any longer. They were almost at their limit. They were barely able to keep themselves from fainting. The effect of the vines and herbs was almost negligible. They couldn't resist the poisonous miasma in the fog. Those who can't bear it stop. Those who can keep going. Mai said. The other 4 squads did the same. Xiao Xian held the small fire crystal in his hand. The energy from the fire crystal helped him stay awake. He could bear it longer than the other junior totem warriors. It's the giant antler deer. Someone found a living creature on the ground. And the mountain antelope. And the wild boar. Living creatures began to appear around them one after another. But these animals were in a deep coma. In this mist they couldn't wake up. Even if they woke up, they would faint again after taking a breath. Everyone in the hunting group was happy. The 3 missing people should be here, and they should be alive. On the hill-like dead bodies of the bats, there were all kinds of animals. It was very difficult to find people in such a big place. Xian, can you see? Mai remembered that Xiao Xian had better night vision than ordinary people, so he asked. I can't see far. I'll try. Xiao Xian said. Xiao Xian used his special ability to see the objects around. But he also felt that there was a layer of fog. He couldn't see clearly. He could only see things within 50 meters. Even so, Xiao Xian was much better than the others. Because all he saw were skeletons, he could only tell what kind of animals they were from the skeletons. The others were alert to the surroundings. Xiaoxian was looking for the 3 human skeletons in the field of vision full of skeletons. Most of the junior totem warriors had stopped and couldn't follow them. Xiaoxian was the only young warrior who had followed them here. However, everyone thought that it was because Xiaoxian had learned from the shaman. That was why he could persist until now. The energy of the fire crystal in his hand was constantly being absorbed into his hand, so that the totem in his mind, which had been weakening, could continue to persist. But it was just barely. Xiaoxian thought that the energy of the fire crystal was probably running out, so the energy he absorbed now was not as much as before. The rhythmic sound of airflow was still there. But Xiaoxian couldn't find the source of the sound, and the others couldn't hear it. He glanced over a pile of skeletons, and finally fixed his eyes on a place that looked like a human. Found it, Xiaoxian whispered. Cheng led the others to the place where Xiaoxian pointed. They really saw the people on the ground. The 3 people were not far away, and they were still breathing. Although they found the 3 people, Xiaoxian still felt uneasy. He always felt that there was something around. He lowered his head to look at the fire crystal in his hand. With just one glance, Xiaoxian felt his scalp go numb. His hair stood on end, and a chill seeped into every bone in his body. In Xiaoxian's hand, the red energy released by the burning fire crystal didn't all enter Xiaoxian's body as usual. Some of it floated behind Xiaoxian. Chapter 121. Only Xiaoxian could absorb the energy of the fire crystal in his hand, and no one else could. Xiaoxian had tried many times in the cave. No matter if it was a junior totem warrior or an intermediate totem warrior, it was the same. Therefore, Xiaoxian always thought that no one else could absorb the energy of the fire crystals in this way, including the 5 team leaders and Caesar. They didn't have any absorption reaction. But now, with his special vision, Xiaoxian saw that part of the red energy released by the burning fire crystal in his hand was floating behind him, and was not absorbed by him. Who was behind him? Uncle Mai? There seemed to be another team leader? Not just one but several people. They had been on guard so that Xiaoxian could focus on finding the missing people. But now Xiaoxian turned around and looked at the place where the red energy line was floating. There was a floating object, about 3 meters high and shaped like a rhombus. Xiaoxian could not see the skeleton, but only a shining rhombus. Mai and the others had been paying attention to the surroundings, but they did not feel anything unusual. They were still wondering if the leader of the bats was not in the cave, or if he was weak and did not come out. Xiaoxian had found the missing 3 people, and they were still alive, which was really a good thing. But when they saw the expression on Xiaoxian's face when he turned around, Mai and the others suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. They turned around abruptly, but before they could see clearly, the long spear in Mai's hand had been thrown out. The long spear flew rapidly in the direction where Xiaoxian had been looking at. The long spear did not hit anything and kept flying. After a while it made a sound of hitting the stone wall, and then fell to the ground. They did not see anything. This was what Mai and the others saw after they turned around. Xiaoxian looked down at the hand holding the fire crystal. The red energy line had changed its direction. Almost at the moment when Mai moved, the red energy lines emitted from the fire crystal floated upwards. Mai and the others looked at Xiaoxian. Seeing Xiaoxian raise his head again, they also raised their heads. This time they did not move but decided to observe first. Mai and the others still saw nothing above their heads. At least they did not see anything within the range of their vision. But Xiaoxian did not. When he looked up, Xiaoxian's pupils suddenly shrank. When they had walked into the fog, Xiaoxian had also paid attention to the top, but he did not see anything, nor could he see the top. Now they were stepping on a large number of bat corpses climbing higher and higher. Xiaoxian could already see the top. There were many shiny rhombuses was hanging at the top. And the one he had seen was the closest one was closest to Xiaoxian. They still gave him the feeling they were still floating. As was this the reason why the bats is strange? If there were too many. There was more than one, there was more. There were at least 100 of them. But there was still some distance to the top. Although it was not more than 50 meters, it was beyond the range of Mai and the others' vision in the fog. But the spear that Mai suddenly threw did not even touch the edge of the thing. Not only that, the few leaders couldn't even sense the existence of that thing. The gap between the two sides was too obvious. If those things attacked Xiao Xian and the others, Xiao Xian could only use 3 words to describe their situation: they were dead meat. The energy line of the fire crystal in his hand was still floating upwards. Looking at the red energy line floating upwards, Xiao Xian wanted to stop the burning of the fire crystal and put it away. But then, no one would know the position of the thing above them. Even Mai and the others could not sense it, let alone the others. Uncle Mai. Xiao Xian felt it was difficult to speak. Xian, what did you see? Mai had a bad feeling. Xiao Xian was about to answer, but suddenly there was a slight cracking sound above them. Mai and the others could also hear the sound. Their faces changed and they shouted, "Be alert!" Chang and the others who were checking on the 3 missing people quickly put up their guard. However, they could only hear the sound coming from above. They couldn't see or hear anything else. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of a brittle shell cracking continued to ring out. Xiao Xian saw that the shining diamond cracked from the middle. The cracked shell broke and fell, revealing the creature inside. Xiao Xian could only see the skeleton. The skeleton was very similar to a bat. It was not big, but the pressure it brought was 100 times stronger than other bats. When the hunting group walked into the mist, there were still bats coming in from the outside and throwing them here. But somehow not a single bat came here. The creature above them was still breaking out of its shell, and its wings stretched out silently. Its wings were not flapping, but it was almost floating there. After breaking out of its shell, it looked down at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian felt a chill down his spine, and every strand of his hair seemed to be trembling. He could only see the skeleton and the sharp teeth in its mouth. He could not see its eyeballs, but he could still feel a pair of bloody eyes staring at him. It just glanced at him, and then turned its head to look at the other diamonds hanging above them. Those were its own kind. The next moment, Xiao Xian saw it open its mouth, and the bones in its nose and throat started to move in a strange way. It was very fast but very regular. The hunters who were standing on top of the dead bats suddenly felt that their heads were about to explode. Their vision, hearing, and everything else disappeared at this moment. Lang Jie and the others fell down without saying a word. Mai and the other intermediate totem warriors were bleeding from their mouths, noses, and ears. Puff! After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Mai and the others fell down one after another. All the torches went out, and there was no light in the cave. Before they passed out, all they saw was the extinguished torches, and then endless darkness. They were all thinking about the same thing. Why didn't they go back to the tribe for help? They were willing to die for the fire crystals, but it did not mean that they wanted the 5 teams to be wiped out. Who would bring the fire crystals back to the tribe? In that case, they would not only fail to make a contribution, but also become the sinners of the tribe. The only one who was still holding on was Xiao Xian. In fact, Xiao Xian was also dizzy. Even with his special vision, everything he saw was almost distorted. What helped him to hold on was the fire crystal in his hand. When the thing above broke out of its shell, it no longer absorbed the energy of the fire crystal. So now all the energy of the fire crystal was supplied to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian regretted it now. If he had not dug out the fire crystal, would these things not have happened? Or he could have stopped them from going back to the tribe for help before taking action? No, even if the tribe used all their strength, they might not be able to defeat those things above. More than 100 of them. Bang! 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 Loud explosions came from above. Xiao Xian struggled to hold on and looked up. Damn it! The one that broke out of its shell first was killing its own kind. The diamond-shaped, hanging on the top, began to explode one by one. They did not break out of their shells but really exploded into pieces. Some of the diamond-shaped actually had cracks before. Some were breaking out of their shells, but now they were all being slaughtered. Those that were still diamond-shaped were directly exploded by the sound waves. And those that had begun to break out of their shells were torn apart and bitten to death one by one. The reason why a leader was called a leader was because it was the leader of the group. As for the leader, only one would be enough. Ignoring the broken limbs and incomplete corpses that fell one after another, Xiao Xian struggled to walk to Mai and the others. He stretched out his hand to feel them, and found that they still had a pulse. He immediately felt relieved. It was good that they were still alive. Unable to stand steadily, Xiaoxian sat down directly. Then, he watched as the one that broke out of its diamond-shaped shell first brutally killed its own kind one by one. One of them had its head bitten off and fell in front of Xiaoxian. Without a torch, Xiaoxian could not see with his normal vision. He could only see the skeleton that fell in front of him. He reached out to touch it. There was fur on its body, and its flesh was very hard. Its wings were like a shield. If they could survive, this group might become the top overlords of this forest. However, there was only one leader. The others were destined to be tragic and become stepping stones for the leader. No wonder the bats in the cave did not come over. Now that the guys above were fighting, the other bats did not dare to join in at all. They would die if they came. There were countless bat corpses piled up here. Every one of them was a strong member of their species when they were still alive. However, after a series of battles, only a few hundred of them survived. Then, after a special transformation that Xiaoxian could not understand, they transformed from powerful wild beasts into top-tier fearsome beasts. After that, the ones that were selected were the strongest in the group. For example, the one that was slaughtering its own kind. One step ahead, one step ahead. Although many of the bats above had not broken out of their shells, they still had some ability to move. They could not be killed all at once. The slaughter went on for about half an hour. Xiaoxian sat on the ground and watched for half an hour. He could not get up now and could not control his body's balance. He could only sit there for the time being. When the killing above was over, the sound waves finally stopped. Xiaoxian felt that his swollen head was much better, and his vision was no longer distorted. Feeling something strange, Xiaoxian looked up. Less than half a meter away from him, a skeleton stood there silently. Xiaoxian could even clearly smell the blood on it. Xiaoxian and the bat looked at each other for a few seconds. When Xiaoxian was wondering if the bat had finished slaughtering its own kind and was going to kill someone, he saw the bat leader bite the headless corpse that fell there. Soon it let go, looked elsewhere and walked over. It also had folded wings and strong hind legs, but when it walked, it was much lighter than the other bats. Even in front of Xiaoxian could barely hear the sound of it walking. The bat leader walked along the battlefield. Everywhere it went, it would bite its own kind that it had killed, and the living things that the other bats had sent over. Strangely, it avoided the people in the hunting group. When the bat leader walked away, Xiaoxian reached out to touch the headless skeleton. It was shriveled. It did not look big, but its appetite was amazing and it ate very fast. The other bats had to lick it. The bat leader seemed to bite it very casually, but soon it let go. However, the prey that was bitten had turned from a coma to a dead one, and its body had become shriveled. Almost all the food sent by the bats in the cave and in the stone crevices had been bitten, except for the people in the hunting group. Looking at it eating, Xiaoxian had a feeling that the last winner of the battle was disdaining the food it had just eaten. Chapter 122. After eating, it flew up and kept flying upwards. Soon it disappeared from Xiaoxian's sight. On the mountain in the sinkhole, a black shadow flashed silently from one of the cracks in the stone wall inside the sinkhole. Yangguang was shining brightly. Under the bright Yangguang, the black shadow went straight to the sky and was hard to catch. If Xiaoxian could see it, he would find that it was moving the bones in its nose and throat quickly, making a sound that even intermediate totem warriors could not hear. However, it was precisely after such an inaudible sound that large bats flew out from various parts of the forest. No matter what these bats were doing just now, whether they were hunting, eating, chasing after the people who threw the smoke grass into the cave, or other things, they all stopped what they were doing and flew up without hesitation towards the sky above the sinkhole. In the gray area full of giant spider webs, the people who were struggling to avoid being chased saw that the bats chasing them all turned around. The bats stuck to the spider webs struggled crazily, gnawing at the spider webs. After breaking free from the spider webs, they flew up and flew towards the sinkhole. "What's wrong with them?" A person who was so tired that he was panting asked his companions. "The direction they are flying is over the mountain. Did something happen to the leader and the others?" "Let's go." The team members blew their whistles, using the sound to communicate their movements. The people who were responsible for attracting the bats in the cave all rushed towards the bat cave. When they got out of the forest, There was no longer dense branches blocking their vision. They saw that the sky above the sinkhole was gathering a dark cloud, and this dark cloud was getting bigger and bigger. Be it nearby or far away, almost all the bats flew toward the sinkhole at this moment and joined the dark cloud. In the cave, Xiao Xian recovered some strength. It was not good to stay here for long. If they stayed here, the people who were unconscious would fall asleep again even if they woke up. Xiao Xian carried the people who were unconscious on the pile of bat corpses out of the foggy area one by one. After carrying everyone out, Xiao Xian gave them some herbs one by one. There were no living bats in the cave. After a while, Xiao Xian heard voices coming from outside the cave. It was the person responsible for luring the bats away. Seeing all the bodies lying on the ground, the people who came over were so scared that their hearts skipped a beat. Only after checking them one by one did they relax. "What's going on outside?" Xiao Xian asked. "The ones that were chasing us have all flown to the top of the mountain. The ones in the cave, well, the bats you mentioned have all left. There are a lot of them gathered at the top of the mountain," the man said. "Let's get out of here quickly." That was indeed the case. Xiao Xian agreed. If the bats gathered outside, they wouldn't be able to get out. After carrying everyone out of the cave, Xiao Xian looked up at the sky. At this time, the dark clouds in the sky had become very large, and the surrounding sky seemed to have darkened. Xiao Xian stood there, unable to sense a trace of Yang Guang. He turned around and looked around. There were many places at the foot of the mountain that were shrouded in shadows. Moreover, this area was rapidly expanding because there were still bats rushing back from afar. What do they want to do? I don't know. Seeing such a scale, the people who were still conscious all felt that what they had done before was too bold. There were no more than 150 people in total, but what about the bats above? Such a huge number was too terrifying. Could it be that all the bats in the forest had come here? While looking at the sky, Xiao Xian suddenly heard some noises. He looked over and saw Caesar running towards him. When the 5 hunting groups were on the mission, Xiao Xian didn't let Caesar join them. Caesar hated the smell of the smoke grass, so he let Caesar stay in the cave of Cha's hunting group, waiting with the wounded. But to his surprise, Caesar actually ran over. Why is he here? Did something happen at the first location? The people around him asked nervously. No, Caesar is just worried about this place, Xiao Xian said. Caesar was staying in the cave, but when he heard the voice of the bat leader, he rushed out and found this place by following the smell. Rubbing Caesar's head, Xiao Xian asked Caesar to rest on the side. In the sky, the dark cloud had expanded to its limit. No more bats joined it, so it flew towards one direction. Xiao Xian looked over. In that direction in the distance there was a very tall mountain, taller than the surrounding mountains. It was surrounded by clouds and mist, and the top of the mountain was covered with white snow. I remember that there are many caves on that mountain. Yes, I once went there with the chief, but there were many cave bears and other ferocious beasts living in the caves, so the chief didn't allow us to get close. The people in the hunting group were talking about their understanding of that mountain. Now the bats that had gathered together and formed a huge dark cloud were flying towards that mountain. Were they going to fight for territory? Maybe a fight is unavoidable. Which side do you think will win? I don't know. I don't want those things to win. Otherwise, how can we hunt in the future? The people in the hunting group were worried. The other people in the hunting group patted each other's shoulders sympathetically. It was really bad luck to fight against these monsters. If it weren't for the fire crystals, they wouldn't dare to provoke these monsters. Since the bats had left, the rest of the people discussed and decided to bring the unconscious people back to the cave first. Probably because of those bats, they didn't encounter any ferocious beasts or wild animals on the way back. One day later, among the unconscious people, Mai and the others were the first to wake up. But after they woke up, they were a little dispirited. They didn't get better until they rested for another day. Xiao Xian said that the bat that broke out of its shell first killed other bats of its kind. After it became the leader, it led the bats to the mountain to fight for territory. When the 5 group leaders heard this, they couldn't sit still and went there to have a look in person. The new leader of the bats led a large group of bats to fight for territory. There were a lot of casualties, but they won and drove out all the other creatures that lived in the mountain cave. When Mai and the others went there, they saw some dead bodies of cave bears. Those huge cave bears were also driven out of the mountain by the bats and didn't dare to step in again. Although this meant that they might have to face those bats again in the future, the 5 group leaders were more happy than worried. Because those bats won't go back to the original mountain after they took the new territory. That was to say they could go there now and dig without worries. This fact made the 5 group leaders so happy that they forgot that their bodies hadn't recovered yet. They hurriedly asked people to get ready to dig. The giant pit became much more peaceful because of the absence of those bats. The 5 group leaders first dug out the layer of bat feces at the bottom of the giant pit, and then Xiaoxian drew a circle at the place where he sensed the fire crystals. The closer the fire crystals were to the ground, the smaller the circle was. After that, the others began to dig. There were still 17 fire crystals at the bottom of the giant pit. That was to say they could dig out at least 17 more fire crystals. No matter how big or small they were, it would be great if they could dig them out. I didn't expect to be alive, Chung said with emotion. We didn't expect that either. Mai smiled bitterly. They were lucky this time. Fortunately, that leader beast didn't attack them. I wonder if that leader beast will become a king beast in the future, Cha said. Many groups of beasts had leaders, but king beasts were extremely rare. Those that were called king beasts were the absolute kings of the group. They belonged to the whole group, not a single group. I think it's possible. At that time we didn't even have the power to fight back. I've been hunting for so many years, but this is the first time I've seen such a ferocious beast. If one day that leader beast becomes a king beast, I will ask the shaman to change the hunting route, Chung said. Places where there were king beasts were absolutely forbidden. The stoneworms were an exception, because relatively speaking, stoneworms wouldn't attack people. But those bats were different. No matter whether that leader beast could become a king beast or not, or how long it would take for it to become a king beast, the 5 team leaders all made a joint decision. In the future, they would stay as far away from that mountain as possible. Never ever provoke those beasts. After Mai and the others were taken out of the bat cave, the miasma area became even more poisonous. Maybe it was because there were more dead bodies. They didn't enter that miasma area again, so they didn't know what had happened. Xiaoxian didn't tell Mai and the others the whole story. He left out some details such as the fire crystals, the leader beast absorbing the energy of the fire crystals, and the leader beast eating all the other living creatures except for the warriors in the hunting group. Xiaoxian could tell some things to the shaman, but he couldn't tell the others. How could he explain it to the shaman when he got back? Xiaoxian looked at his palm and thought. 5 days later, all the fire crystals were dug out from the place where Xiaoxian had marked. Looking at the small bag of fire crystals, the 5 team leaders' eyes were filled with tears. They had almost been wiped out because of these. They put the fire crystals in the best animal skin bag, even the ones that Chang and Mai had kept for themselves. Xian, where is your fire crystal? Come on, put them together and wrap them up. When we get back to the tribe, we can use them together. Mai said. It's gone. Xiaoxian said. He had absorbed all the energy of that small fire crystal. After burning up all the energy, the fire crystal turned into a dim white powder. But Xiaoxian couldn't tell them that. You lost it? The 5 team leaders paused and looked at Xiaoxian. After making sure that Xiaoxian really couldn't take it out, and didn't want to keep it for himself, the 5 felt it was a pity. But Xiaoxian carried them out of the bat corpses one by one, so they couldn't blame him. This time, the one who made the biggest contribution was still Xiaoxian. Well, Caesar would be counted in. Mao, like the other young warriors who were recovering, didn't participate in the digging of the fire crystals, but just watched from the edge of the giant pit. The 5 team leaders carefully put the small bag of fire crystals away, and happily discussed how to ask the shaman for a reward when they returned to the tribe. Mao, on the other hand, was thinking in his mind, I wonder what kind of expression my Abba would have when he knows about this when the hunting team gathers. At the same time, Ta, who was hunting in the green field, sneezed. He felt inexplicably uncomfortable recently. Why? Chapter 123. Since most of the hunting time was spent dealing with bats and digging for fire crystals, the warriors in the hunting group would not hunt for food on purpose, except for hunting when they were hungry. Basically, no one in the 5 hunting groups would go out of their way to hunt and store food. As the gathering day approached, There were only a few days left for hunting. The 5 group leaders stayed together almost all day, just to keep an eye on that small bag of fire crystals. As for hunting prey, the 5 group leaders would tell you that it was just a small matter. Finally, the gathering day arrived. Ta led the advance group and hunted a lot of prey. In the first hunt of the year, Gigu's hunting group had a good harvest. Ta did not want to lose to them. Luckily, they were lucky enough to find a kind of curly-tailed plant. He did not know what would happen if Mai and the others brought the wolf. Ta was a little worried. They came back earlier this time. They thought that it would take 2 or 3 days for the 5 hunting groups to arrive. Unexpectedly, the 5 hunting groups arrived together. This had never happened before. Only when a hunting group was in great danger would they ask for help from other hunting groups. However, the 5 hunting groups, although many were injured, they all looked positive. Looking at the wolf, well, it seemed to be getting along well with the other warriors. Seeing that the 5 hunting groups were in good condition, but with only a pitiful amount of prey, Ta felt that he was holding his breath again. What happened? Ta asked in a bad tone. The leaders of the 5 hunting groups stood together, showing their white teeth to tower. Their smiles were very stupid. In the tribe, Old Ku had been suffering from insomnia recently, especially in the days before the return of the hunting group. He walked to the path of glory several times every day. He wondered how Xian and the others were doing. Would Caesar perform well? It was the first time for him to go out of the tribe. There were so many beasts in the forest. Would he be okay? While he was thinking, Old Ku suddenly heard an eagle cry in the sky. He looked up at the cha-cha in the sky. Old Ku paused. The hunting group was back. Without any hesitation, Old Ku hurried to the path of glory. When he got there, some people were already standing by the road talking. I heard that many people were seriously injured this time. Which hunting group? I don't know. Old Ku was worried. Could it be Mai's hunting group? Before they set off, someone had said that Mai would probably encounter trouble if he brought Caesar, a wolf. Who would bring a wild beast out to hunt? Many people around them also mentioned Caesar, and their words were not very nice. Old Ku almost got into a fight with someone. Soon after, those who were more seriously injured were sent back. There were indeed quite a few of them. Half a day later, the hunting team showed up. Except for the advance group, the other groups didn't have much prey, someone said. Not only was it not much, it was pitifully little. What happened? While the crowd was discussing, many people in the other hunting group were also thinking to themselves, sure enough, our hunting group is stronger. Look at the results of their hunting team this time. No one had expected that the results of the hunt would be so terrible. In the past, every time they came back, they would bring back a lot of food. Even at the worst time, it was much better than this time. Sai, forget it. It's good that you're back. It was the first hunt of the year, and many people were looking forward to it. But now they were inevitably disappointed. Winter was over, and it seemed that they would have to continue to starve. Their families were already starving. Even though they were disappointed, they still decided to comfort the people who had returned. It was not easy for them to adjust their emotions. They planned to say a few words of comfort when the main group came over. Unexpectedly, the people who had embarked on the road of glory all held their heads high and puffed out their chests. They did not feel dispirited at all. They pulled the few prey they had and waved their fists at their families on the roadside. The people who had prepared a lot of comforting words swallowed them back. What happened to them? Were they shocked by the results of the hunt? No one could figure out why they were behaving like that. Old Ku looked at Xiao Xian and Caesar, who were safe and sound, and finally felt relieved. The results of the hunt didn't matter, as long as they were back. However, Old Ku looked at the team leader Ta, who was walking in front of the team. The expression on his face was very subtle. You could say that he was happy, but he was not as proud as everyone thought. But you could also say that he was depressed. What on earth happened? When the hunting team finished the sword cleansing ceremony, they rushed down the mountain. Some warriors even forgot about the small amount of prey they had. Soon, everyone knew why the hunting team behaved so strangely this time. Fire crystals. Old Ku's mouth trembled. He confirmed it several times and then he stamped his crutch hard. Not only Old Ku in the tribe, the same thing happened in many people's families. Some older people even fainted because of excessive excitement. Bad results? There was no problem. The fire crystals were the biggest reward. Poor food at home? That was not a problem. There were still fish in the river at the foot of the mountain. They would not die if they ate fish for 20 days. What? Did they think the energy in those fish was too little? There were fire crystals. The shaman had said that all those who had contributed to this matter, including their relatives, parents, wives, children, brothers and sisters, could be called up. Now the tribe was bustling. Those who were related by blood hurried to find connections, and those who were not created connections. What a rare opportunity. It was said that they had found a lot of fire crystals this time. Xiaoxian played an important role in this matter. But in the tribe, except for Old Ku, Xiaoxian had no close friends. The shaman specially gave him a few more places, so that he could bring people who were not related by blood up the mountain. Old Ku, Gu and some others who had helped Xiaoxian before were brought up the mountain. Tu and Jieba, who had awakened their power this year, were also brought up by Xiaoxian. Unfortunately, only those who had awakened their power could absorb the fire crystals. So, for some people, even if Xiaoxian wanted to help them, it was useless. That day, the people who were taken to the mountain were all overjoyed, while those who couldn't, especially those from the other hunting group, were so envious and jealous that their eyes turned red. The shaman put a few fire crystals next to the fire seed. After he finished chanting, the fire seed's flame grew bigger, and swallowed the fire crystals next to it. Different from when Xiaoxian absorbed the fire crystals by himself, in the fire pit, the red energy released by the fire crystals could be seen by everyone. The red energy came out from the fire, and was absorbed by the people sitting around the fire pit. Although this was an action of 5 hunting teams, the advance group could not be completely abandoned. After all, the advance group was looking for medicine for everyone. Every time someone was seriously injured, they would use the medicine they found. Therefore, there were also people from the advance group sitting around them. However, they always felt a little uncomfortable, especially Ta, who had a very complicated feeling. It was that boy again. That was what Ta thought after he knew the cause and effect. Although the fire crystals they brought back were few, they were not used up. The ones that were burned were enough for those who went up the mountain to absorb. More would be a waste. So, the rest of the fire crystals were kept by the shaman, and he would reward them according to their merits. If others wanted to absorb the fire crystals, they had to show their merits, and the shaman would naturally reward them. The shaman praised Caesar in person, and also said that he would never take back the pattern plate he gave Caesar. That was to say, unless Caesar died of natural causes or had an accident during hunting, as long as he was in the tribe, no one could kill him. That was the shaman's attitude. With Caesar as a precedent, some people were wondering if they should also catch a cub and raise it. After absorbing the fire crystals for 2 days, several warriors in the tribe advanced from the primary level to the intermediate level. For example, Lang Jie and Ong had already broken through the chop. The totem patterns on their arms had already extended beyond their elbows. This made Lang Jie party at home for several days. He even threw away his grandpa's precious stone hammer. Back then, Tuo and Kiki were among the same batch of people who were awakened with Lang Ga. Everyone knew that they were very outstanding, and these 2 people were promoted to intermediate totem warriors last year. However, Lang Jie did not expect that he would be promoted so soon. The topic of the fire crystals would last for a long time in the tribe. The tribe was not big, and there was only one tribe in the vast area. There were few topics to talk about, so this topic would not die down in a short time. Every day when they went out, they would hear people talking about the fire crystals. For example, whose warriors advanced after absorbing the energy of the fire crystals, whose warriors were still a little bit worse, and whose warriors failed to go up the mountain, etc. In addition, Caesar and Xiaoxian were also hot topics. I heard that the place where the fire crystals were dug was found by that wolf. I'm so jealous. If we had a wolf in our team, would we also find the fire crystals? Even if we can't find the fire crystals, it's good to find something else. Why don't we go hunting this time and catch some cubs? Xiaoxian seemed to have said that it was easier to train a cub. Didn't the wolves in the forest often fight? It's a pity that those cubs were killed. We can bring them back and raise them ourselves. It won't cost us much food. That makes sense. Xiaoxian did not expect that just this hunting trip would make people want to raise wolves. After the fire crystals, Xiaoxian went to the shaman's place to talk. The shaman asked about some details, such as why Xiaoxian could sense the location of the fire crystals. Even if he had more power of inheritance than others, he might not be able to sense the location of the fire crystals so clearly. Others might not know, but as the shaman he knew it too well. In the beginning, the shamaness and Xiaoxian were just probing each other. In the process, they started to trust each other and revealed more information. The shaman let Xiaoxian know some things that even the chief didn't know. And Xiaoxian also showed the shaman many abilities that were different from others in the tribe. Here, there was only one tribe, and the shaman's words were absolute authority. If it were a selfish person, he might feel that Xiaoxian threatened his position and wanted to get rid of him quickly. But in fact, every time Xiaoxian showed some abilities that were different from others, the shaman was very happy. His old face, which usually maintained an indifferent attitude, would always show a rare deep smile. Xiaoxian did not intend to hide it from the shaman this time. He pointed at his eyebrows and said, "The totem told me. Did you really lose the small piece of fire crystal that you were holding?" The shaman asked again. He didn't care about anything, he was just curious. He didn't think that Xiaoxian would easily lose such an important thing. Moreover, since he could sense the fire crystal, why didn't he notice it when he lost it? "I didn't say I lost it. I just said that the fire crystal is gone." Xiaoxian raised his hand and said to the shaman, "I can absorb fire crystals." Chapter 124. The shaman's face trembled violently, as if he couldn't believe Xiaoxian's words. However, Xiaoxian didn't seem to be lying. "Wait a moment." The shaman turned around and took out a piece of fire crystal. Handing it to Xiaoxian, "You absorb it, let me see." Xiaoxian didn't say much. He took the fire crystal and began to absorb it. Others couldn't see the energy of the fire crystal when Xiaoxian absorbed it, but the shaman could see a little. Although it wasn't clear, those energy lines were real. How could it be? The shaman was puzzled. Xiaoxian told the secret in the hope that the shaman could answer some of his doubts. He didn't know much about the special power in his body, so he needed the shaman to explain. But unexpectedly, the shaman didn't know the answer. Seeing the shaman lost in thought again, Xiaoxian put the fire crystal in his hand on the stone table in front of the shaman. Xiaoxian's action brought the shaman back to reality. He looked at the fire crystal in front of him, which was as big as a quail egg, and then at Xiaoxian. He wanted to see some reluctance, dissatisfaction, or greed in Xiaoxian's eyes. After all, the biggest contributor was still Xiaoxian. According to the distribution, Xiaoxian should get the most benefits. But in fact, Xiaoxian didn't get much. However, the shaman found that Xiaoxian's eyes were very calm. There was no reluctance, no greed, and no dissatisfaction with the distribution of the fire crystal. What a state of mind! The shaman was moved. For the tribe, Xian was wronged. "Take this fire crystal," the shaman said. "No need." Seeing the shaman's guilty face, Xiaoxian said, "How about a smaller one? This one is too big. If I lose it, it will be a big loss." A rice-sized fire crystal could last for several days. There was no need to use such a big one. Moreover, they didn't usually use it in the tribe. They only used it when hunting, but they didn't need so many. The shaman felt that Xiaoxian was actually a person of noble character. He was not greedy for merit. He was not greedy. Everything he did was for the tribe. Thinking of this, he said to Xiaoxian in an even more amiable manner, "Take it." "All right." Xiaoxian took back the fire crystal the size of a quail egg and said, "Actually, the fire crystal doesn't have much effect on me. I won't improve even if I absorb it." The shaman was speechless. Xiaoxian wasn't lying. The energy of the fire crystals didn't affect him as much as the others. Others would have an obvious improvement after absorbing the fire crystals, but Xiaoxian didn't seem to have any other benefits other than having a better spirit and a faster recovery of physical strength. He had absorbed more than half of the small piece of fire crystal that he had used as an experiment. This time he had absorbed a lot of energy from the fire crystals by the fire pit with the others. He had absorbed more energy than the other warriors, but the totem patterns on his arms did not extend. Coming out from the shaman's place, Xiaoxian had several animal skin scrolls in his hands. They were empty scrolls used to make wu roll. After talking about the fire crystals, the shaman showed Xiaoxian some ancient scrolls. They were all drawn by the shaman in the past. Among them, There was a Wu roll about hunting dogs drawn by the ancestors. The shaman was like this. The more you showed your ability, the more help he would give you. As long as it was beneficial to the tribe, he would open the door to help you. In the past, the shaman might not have shown these early Wu roll scrolls to Xiaoxian. After all, they involved some secrets of the tribe. And before the time was right, the shaman didn't want to let others know about these secrets. But now the shaman changed his mind. The ancient scrolls drawn by the ancestors were well kept by the shaman. After thousands of years, the ancient scrolls were not damaged much. However, these ancient scrolls couldn't be taken out. They could only be read at the shaman's place. Xiaoxian first skimmed through the ancient scrolls, and then picked the one about hunting dogs and carefully read it. After going down the mountain in the afternoon, Xiaoxian locked himself in the room and began to draw on the empty scroll with a pen. He copied down what he had seen in the ancient scrolls. When he was still in the cave, Xiaoxian had seen pictures of hunting warriors with hunting dogs from the murals in the stone room. But he didn't have a clear idea. After all, this was a new world. Anything that looked normal might hide many secrets that others didn't know. But this time, after reading the ancient scrolls, Xiaoxian also found that the ancestors had different requirements for hunting dogs. According to what was written in the ancient scroll, the ancestors would select a group of healthy, strong, and clever puppies when the hounds were still young. Then they would undergo strict training. During the training, some puppies might die, and the last ones who survived would go through the second round of selection. The hunting dogs raised by the ancestors were divided into ordinary hunting dogs and accompanying hunting dogs. The ordinary hunting dogs were the ones that were left behind after training. They would usually participate in hunting or defense, but they were not truly recognized by the tribe and were not passed down by the tribe. Accompanying hunting dogs were different. They were carefully selected, and they had enough strength and loyalty. They were recognized by the whole tribe, and the shaman engraved the tribe's totem on them. From then on, they would become a member of the tribe. They could also participate in the sacrifice. They could absorb the totem power from the fire totem like others, and they would be much stronger than ordinary hunting dogs. However, this engraving only existed in their generation. The pups of accompanying hunting dogs were still like ordinary hunting dogs. They had to go through training and selection to be recognized. But generally speaking, the offspring of accompanying hunting dogs were very good. As for the engraving secret skill, only the tribe's shaman could master it, because it needed the power of inheritance. When Xiaoxian was reading the ancient scrolls at the shaman's place, the shaman said that if Xiaoxian wanted to try, he would find all the ancient scrolls about this. After all, now it seemed that Caesar already met the requirements of engraving. The engraving secret skill is very complicated, and it can't be mastered in a short time. This was what the shaman said when Xiaoxian left. Xiaoxian understood what the shaman meant. The shaman just didn't want Xiaoxian to be too impatient. If he tried to engrave before fully mastering the skill, not only would the engraving fail, but Caesar might also die. According to the shaman volume, there was a chance of success when the secret engraving skill was used. Among the 10 selected hounds, only half of them succeeded in engraving the engraving skill. It was very risky. Even the current shaman had never tried the engraving secret skill. After all, there was no animal in the tribe that he could try it on. Xiaoxian had to think carefully about what to do. It was up to him to make the choice, and the shaman wouldn't interfere. Since there was such a big risk, Xiaoxian naturally wouldn't treat it lightly. He had to study the so-called engraving secret skill first. Looking at Caesar, who was lying at his feet and yawning, Xiaoxian sighed in his heart. Caesar was just a wild animal, not at the level of a ferocious beast. In the forest, he couldn't compare to the alpha wolf in the pack. This was determined by his innate condition, and had nothing to do with Caesar himself. It wasn't possible to become a ferocious beast from an ordinary wild animal overnight. Just like the bats in the bat cave, every one of them had to step on a mountain of corpses to become a ferocious beast. In such a big environment, ordinary wild animals couldn't survive for long in the forest. Even the people in the tribe had to work hard to become stronger. Whether it was humans or beasts, they all tried to swim up the pyramid, leaving behind countless corpses on every floor. Alas, we can only take it slow. Xiaoxian sighed as he looked at Caesar, who was still yawning slowly. Every day, Xiaoxian copied the ancient scrolls he read at the shaman's place onto a new animal skin roll. Then he studied them carefully and used the power of inheritance according to the instructions in the scrolls. The shaman also took out all the ancient scrolls related to the engraving secret skill and showed them to Xiaoxian. Except when he went out to hunt, Xiaoxian continued to copy the ancient scrolls as long as he stayed in the tribe. In Xiaoxian's room, he had finished copying more than 10 animal skin rolls. This was the result of many times of copying. While Xiaoxian was copying these ancient scrolls, many people came to him. Since the people in the tribe had the idea of raising wild animals, every time the hunting team came back, there would be people coming to ask about it. For example, Moer came to Xiaoxian's room one day. Moer wanted to ask about the Xiaoxian's methods of raising and training, but no one had any experience in this field. It seemed simple, but many people kept raising them until they died. Xiaoxian looked at the cub in Moer's hand and raised his eyebrows. Cave lion. This cub was not easy to find. Cave lions were quite ferocious, and most of them would grow up to be ferocious beasts. Even wolves would not dare to provoke them. Moer wondered what would happen to this cub. According to Moer, on their hunting route, a cave bear fought with a cave lion in a mountain. The cave lion lost, and the cub in the cave was bitten to death. When the hunting team went there was only one cub left. So Moer brought it back and wanted to try raising it himself. Xiaoxian had no experience in raising a cave lion. At first he treated Caesar as a dog, but in the end, he still had the ferocious nature of a wolf. Fortunately, Caesar could control it. As for Moer's cave lion, Xiaoxian could only tell him some general things to pay attention to. As for how to raise it, it was up to Moer. This kind of ferocious beast had to be guarded at all times, and could not be allowed to get out of control. If something went wrong, the people in the tribe would kill it first. Even though they knew it would be troublesome to raise it, many people still tried. Not only Moer, but in the next few hunting missions, every time someone brought back a wolf cub similar to the one Caesar had when he first arrived. Some people also brought back other animals. Some people vowed to raise them, but in the end they ended up in the pot or in the stomach. But there were still a few people who insisted, and most of them were young warriors like Moer. During the winter, Xiaoxian had demonstrated the ability of flying animals like Cha-Cha to everyone. At the beginning of this year, Caesar had been recognized by the tribe. This had also given the group of young warriors a new direction to take. Xiaoxian was now the first person in the tribe who raised animals and was recognized by the shaman. So every time someone brought back a cub, they would run to him to ask about it. Especially Mao, it was understandable for others to catch wolves, tigers, leopards, lions, etc. In the tribe, these ferocious carnivorous beasts were the most satisfying. But why did Mao bring back a wild boar cub? No, it was not a wild boar, but more like a deer dolphin. Chapter 125. When Mao was hunting, he saw creatures with 4 fangs and thought they were like ferocious boars. He saw a few wild boars with 4 fangs. When he finally caught a cub and brought it back, he was told that it wasn't a wild boar, but another kind of wild beast that looked like a wild boar. They had 2 pairs of 4 fangs, and they didn't have thick fur on their bodies. They looked a little fierce. He thought it was a cub of a ferocious beast, but it turned out to be just a wild beast. Mao was very disappointed after he knew it, but he did not kill the cub and eat it. Instead, he raised it and went down the mountain to ask Xiaoxian about how to raise it. Many people laughed at Mao secretly. As the eldest grandson of the chief and the son of the team leader, he had to raise such a creature. Compared with other people who raised wolves, tigers, leopards and so on, Mao raised this one as a food preparation. Mao named the creature that looked like a deer dolphin Sia, which was probably Mao's obsession. Fortunately, the cub he caught was a male, and he did not find any ferocious beast with 4 pairs of fangs. This kind of creature would have 4 fangs when it grew up, so Mao decided to keep it for now. At first, there were many people who came to see Xiaoxian, but gradually the number of people decreased. After several hunts, less than 1/10 of the people came to see Xiaoxian to discuss the experience of raising a cub. The rest of the people ate the cub as they raised it. However, people in the tribe were new to raising animals and there were many mistakes. Sometimes they could not control their strength, sometimes they were impatient, or their methods were wrong. Of course, not all cubs were suitable to become hound beasts. Even if their species were generally fierce, some individuals might have physical defects, or they might be more timid than others of their species, or even have other quirks. Even if they were trained, they might not be qualified. Although it was very difficult, and fewer people wanted to keep raising cubs, some people in the tribe still insisted. One day, after the shaman walked around the tribe, he called Xiaoxian for a talk. The shaman could not stand it anymore. It was a mess and there were too many hidden dangers. He hoped to get a hunting beast that had both strength and loyalty. Not a trader who only had strength and ferocity, but would bite the tribesmen when they grew up. The quality of the trained beast would be determined by the quality of the trained beast. After that, Xiaoxian found a suitable open space at the foot of the mountain and placed a large stone slab there as a drawing board. As long as he didn't go hunting, he would sit there every few days to explain. During the 2 days when the two hunting teams were alternating, he would also take some time to talk to the other hunting team. After all, once the hunt started, he would not be able to explain to the other hunting team. If you want them to learn what you're teaching, you have to give them commands and hand signals before pulling the straw rope during training. This way, they'll remember the commands and hand signals you give them. If you pulled the rope around their neck before you shouted out the command or made a gesture, their memory of the rope would be deeper than your command. Come on, Caesar, come and demonstrate. You're just like this. Xiaoxian had seen more than once people in the tribe pull the cubs they brought back while shouting commands. Unfortunately, the training had little effect. I'll tell you a few methods. First, mechanical stimulation. To put it bluntly, you have to use certain methods to force them to do what you want them to do. For example, you want them to lie down in the grass. In order to prevent them from getting up and walking around, you can press them down with your hands. Through this method, you can make them lie down in the grass. After repeated training like this, they will form the correct action consciousness when they hear the command. As Xiaoxian was talking, a young warrior about his age held the cub he caught with one hand and said, "Just like this. You're not pressing them down, you're strangling them." Xiaoxian told them all the details of his plan. In addition, Xiaoxian also told them how to stimulate them with food, and how to combine mechanical and reward training. For many people in the tribe, the food reward method was the most unacceptable. In their eyes, food was so precious that they couldn't even bear to part with it. In the past, when they caught these cubs, they would eat them directly. Now they even had to share food with them. It was unacceptable. However, there were still some people who were willing to give up food, and most of them were young warriors. For example, Mo and Mao were very willing to give up food. Mo's current situation was similar to Xiaoxian's in the beginning. He moved out to live alone, and the family was not hungry. As for Mao, there were too many warriors in the family, and they never lacked food. It was not a problem for him to get some food to feed the cubs. Sometimes when Xiaoxian was talking about imitation training, he would call Caesar over to demonstrate so that the cubs could get along with Caesar more. Some of the cubs would do the same thing with Caesar. However, it was more difficult for Mo's cave lion and Mao's Sia. The former was unruly, while the latter was simply a glutton and a lazy worm. Mo's cave lion was named Mao, which was quite different from the lion Xiaoxian had seen in his last life. Most of the cave lions lived independently, in caves on the mountain, and did not hunt in groups. Because they often faced fierce big beasts such as cave bears, they were not weak, but difficult to tame. Both Mo and Mao had to spend more effort than others, and it depended on whether they had the patience. Days went by. In the tribe, fewer and fewer cubs were brought back, but the ones left grew up day by day. After Xiaoxian's explanation and demonstration, the young warriors gradually changed their training methods. Now, when walking in the tribe, it was common to see some young warriors with cubs. When they gathered together to chat, they would also bring their cubs with them. At first, they were all tied with straw ropes, but gradually, the ropes on some cubs' necks were removed. They did not run around, but followed the young warriors closely every time they went out. The reliance training was not for nothing. Sometimes, the young warriors from two hunting groups would compare themselves with each other to see who was more successful in raising their cubs. Some of the old warriors in the tribe, who had not hunted for many years, still had a worried mentality. They worried that the beasts in the tribe would come out to bite them when they slept at night. They were not optimistic about this method, and did not want their descendants to try it. Among them, Some of the injuries on their bodies were caused by the ferocious beasts in the forest. Even if the beasts in the tribe were not very threatening, they were still very vigilant. When they got together with their old comrades, these old warriors would discuss to report to the team leaders or the chief, and see if they could persuade the young warriors in the tribe not to raise those beasts. However, the two team leaders had their own children, and the chief's grandson even raised a bald pig. It was said that the bald pig had eaten a lot of the herbs hidden by Ta. Look at Ta's face every day. It was as if he had been smeared with ash, but he still did not kill the bald pig. A group of old warriors was so anxious that their beards were almost falling off. They still could not think of a reasonable reason to kill those cubs, but the young warriors in the tribe were still actively raising them every day. When those old warriors were discussing in private on the mountain, Ta was holding his stone knife tightly. He was so angry that blue veins stood out on his forehead. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. In front of him, his son's bald pig had eaten a bag of medicinal herbs that he had placed under the stone bench. That bag of medicinal herbs was actually insect repellent. If it was smoked, it could kill a large number of insects. However, the bald pig in front of him was not affected at all after eating it. It was still running and jumping around. How many times had it done this? This pig had been looking for food everywhere after it woke up. Its nose was also sensitive and it could not hide things well. If it found something, it could not get it back. Maybe because it had eaten too much. Sia was now much stronger than other cubs in the tribe. It was not that Ta did not want to kill Sia, but he did not want to lose face. If he killed Sia, people on Gigu's side would definitely laugh at them for not being able to raise a pig well. So he had been holding back and almost got internal injuries. If you eat again, I will kill you, Ta said. Sia, who was chewing the herbs, looked up at Ta and shouted. Ta felt that this bald pig was really asking for a beating. How could Mao bring such a thing back? Thinking about how obedient Caesar was raised by Xiaoxian, he felt that this bald pig in front of him was a loser. Mao, who had just come back from the training ground, saw that his father was angry again, so he quickly carried Sia out. Tie it up for me. Use a thicker straw rope to tie it up, and don't let it out, or I will beat you to death. Ta shouted at Mao's back. Mao, who was running out quickly with Sia in his arms, thought, it caused trouble, why should I be beaten? Somewhere on the mountainside. With a cold face, Moer looked at the tattered animal skin on the bed, and then turned his head to look under the table against the wall. Come out. The ball hiding under the table shrunk inwards again. Moer held the knife handle and thought, should I just kill it? In the tribe, many people brought trouble because of raising cubs, but Xiaoxian did not have time to care about it now. While studying the ancient scroll of engraved secret skills, Xiaoxian found one thing. It was not the totem that played a leading role in his improvement, but another kind of power in his body. The egg-shaped thing that encircled the totem, or rather, the strange stone that brought him to this world, what exactly was it? Warriors said that the totem dominated the power in everyone's body, but Xiaoxian faintly felt that the totem in his mind could not go beyond that egg. No matter how active it was, when the flame on its horns was at its strongest, it could not go beyond that egg at all. The energy absorbed by the fire crystal was more like an auxiliary function. It could speed up the recovery but could not improve because the totem could not play the role of dominator. Putting down the animal skin scroll, Xiaoxian rubbed his eyebrows. What on earth is that stone for? At this time, Caesar came over with a wooden box in his mouth. The wooden box was tied with a straw rope, and Caesar bit the straw rope directly. In the wooden box, there were stone tools made by Old Ku recently. Xiaoxian spent too much time studying the ancient scroll, so Old Ku made some stone tools and asked Caesar to bring them over. Taking the wooden box, Xiaoxian patted Caesar's head. We are going to set off again, are you coming? Caesar immediately took a step forward. Yes. Xiaoxian rolled up the animal skin scroll and put it away. If there was no accompanying hunting dog, then he would get an accompanying hunting wolf. Chapter 126. Ta's hunting team was about to set off again. The people in the tribe were used to seeing a different animal on the path of glory. So far, it was the only animal that could hunt with the team. At first, no one thought that Caesar could be so successful, and that he could follow the hunting team for several times in a row. Now there were 2 scars on Caesar's body. The wounds had healed. but the hair on the wounds had not grown back. The wounds looked very obvious. They were caused by an adult giant-clawed beast during one of the hunting trips. That time the Xiaoxian was shocked. If Caesar had reacted a little slower, he would have been cut in half by the giant-clawed beast's claws. Later, when they returned to the tribe, the Xiaoxian planned to let Caesar rest a few more times. Unexpectedly, on the next hunting trip, Caesar took the initiative to follow them again, and the Xiaoxian could not drive him away. He liked to run in the forest, and he liked to hunt prey that were much bigger than him. Every time the hunting time approached, Caesar would be very excited. When he was recuperating, the Xiaoxian asked him to stay in the tribe, and the whole wolf became listless. Now the wounds were all healed, but the hair did not grow back. Mai and the others said that the hair around the two scars might not grow back. Just like the people in the tribe, the scars on the body were the proof of battle achievements, proving that they had faced prey that was stronger than them. Therefore, the scars on Caesar's body did not make people doubt Caesar's ability. On the contrary, they praised him. This time, before entering the forest, several team leaders talked for a short while, and one of them mentioned Caesar. The other four were very envious of Mai. Since they had Caesar, Mai and the others had several unexpected surprises. From the fire crystals at the beginning to some hard-to-find medicinal materials, they were all found by Caesar's wolf nose. In addition, when hunting, he could also help attack. How could they not be envious? By the way, Mai, you should pay attention to the ferocious beasts and wild animals in the hunting area. There may be some changes, said Cheng. Speaking of changes, there seems to be some. The giant antler deer herd, the bison herd, and even the wolves seem to have changed. Mai also said, "What happened?" The other team leaders also asked curiously. After all, the forest was so big, and the hunting area was only a small part of it. Generally speaking, the wild beasts and ferocious beasts in the forest would not change their living area at will, unless the seasons changed. Most of the time, they would stay in their own territory to hunt. However, Chang Himai said that there were changes in the area where the wild beasts and ferocious beasts were active. This was unusual. Did something happen on your side again? One of the team leaders asked, referring to the strange bat incident at the beginning of the year. No, it's not. Chang shook his head. But it does have something to do with those bats. The bats had gone to take over a large territory. All the ferocious beasts on the mountain had been chased away, and the ferocious beasts that had left had to look for new territories. The battle had been going on until now. Coupled with the threat of the bats themselves, a large area of wild beasts and ferocious beasts in the surrounding area had changed. The birth of a powerhouse would cause a large-scale restructuring of the local power structure. In addition to the new mountain occupied by the bats, there were also changes in the giant pit. Chang planned to go to the giant pit again to see if he could dig out something, but when he went again, he could not enter. The giant pit, as well as the stone crevices and caves, were all filled with poisonous miasma. There used to be some sparse grass on the top of the mountain, but now it was all dead. The whole place looked gloomy and horrible. Did those bats go back? Mai asked. I don't know. I didn't see any bats there. Cheng said. Then they shouldn't. It's probably caused by the dead bats and other animals in the cave. A team leader said. Hundreds of ferocious beasts and bats in the transformation period all died in there. They probably caused the formation of the poisonous miasma. The first 3 members of Cheng's team to go missing were sent back to the tribe and treated for a long time. It was obvious that the poisonous miasma was very powerful. Even if the others were unconscious, Xiaoxian quickly carried them out of the poisonous miasma area. They did not stay there for long. Knowing how powerful the miasma was, Cheng did not dare to rush in with the others. He had to give up and ask the others to stay away. The mountain where the giant pit was located and the territory occupied by the bats were not on Mai's hunting route, but they would affect their hunting. Don't mess with those bats, Mai said. Of course I know. Cheng understood, but he was not willing to give up and just complained. After entering the forest, the hunting group split up. Mai led the others to the hunting area of the first stronghold to hunt. There was nothing different on the first day, but Mai also told the others in the hunting group to be careful during this period. There might be some ferocious beasts that had not appeared in this hunting area before. They should also pay attention to the changes in the herd. There was a giant antlered deer herd in the hunting area of the first stronghold. Mai led the others there to hunt. Mai, have you noticed that we have not encountered the wolves that used to attack the giant antlered deer herd several times? A middle-aged warrior in the hunting group said to Mai. Yes. Mai did not say anything. Caesar didn't encounter that pack of wolves during his first hunting trip. Everyone in the hunting group had been worried about what would happen if Caesar encountered that pack of wolves. However, they hadn't encountered any of them this year. The first time was because of an accident and they left the hunting route. The second time they only saw a few wolves from the original pack from afar, and those wolves didn't look so good at that time. Until now they had not seen a single wolf, which was a bit strange. That pack of wolves should have appeared around the giant antlered deer herd. But, everyone be careful, Mai said. Without the wolves to compete with them for the giant antlered deer, every time the hunting group came they would hunt a lot of giant antlered deer. Whoosh! Whoosh! Several spears appeared on two giant antlered deer that were distracted by the appearance of Caesar. Lang Jie and the others dragged the two giant antlered deer to the side and quickly dealt with them. They would bring them back later. Caesar jumped on the back of an old giant antlered deer and bit its neck. However, compared to the giant antlered deer, Caesar did not have much advantage in terms of size. Even though the giant antlered deer was old, its strength was still not to be underestimated. After getting rid of Caesar, the giant antlered deer ran away. Caesar could not catch up with it. After chasing for a while, he slowed down and looked at the deer that ran farther and farther away. Lang Jie and the others who were dealing with the prey had been paying attention to that side. The bitten giant antlered deer had already run away and only a small shadow could be seen. They were about to comfort Caesar. After all, Caesar had helped a lot during these hunting trips. He would not cause trouble like the cubs in the tribe. Everyone had a better impression of him, and was not so afraid of him. Just as they were about to say something, everyone's eyes froze. Lang Jie and the others stopped what they were doing. Especially Caesar, who was about to turn back. Unexpectedly, the moment before he turned back, he saw that the giant antlered deer was bitten by a big wolf that suddenly jumped out. The huge impact made the giant antlered deer stumble and fall. It struggled to stand up, but the reality did not give it a chance. Then the third a group of wolves surrounded the giant antlered deer. Even from a distance, Lang Jie could see the bloody meat that was bitten and thrown out. Those wolves. Lang Jie had a bad feeling. They are not from the previous wolf group. Mai's face darkened. Every hunting team had a certain understanding of the prey and predators in their hunting area. The wolf group was an important part of that. Naturally, they knew which wolves were active in this area in the past. Although they were far away and could not see clearly, judging from the hunting style, they were not from the previous group. The wolves that appeared now were more cruel. They did not bite the giant antlered deer to death directly, but bit and gnawed it to death. Caesar stared at the wolves in the distance. The skin on his nose wrinkled, and the fangs in his mouth were exposed. He also growled in a low voice. Caesar, come back. Xiao Xian shouted. Caesar was similar to the previous group of wolves here, but the wolves that appeared now were more dangerous. Caesar could not be allowed to touch them. Not to mention that he was outnumbered. Even if he fought alone, Caesar might not be able to win. The wolves were generally larger, and their style was quite ferocious. It would not be good for him to go there. Normally, when hunting, the warriors of the hunting team would not provoke the wolves. The wolves in the forest were very vengeful. Unless they were all killed, they had to be careful of their revenge. Since there was a new wolf group, the warriors of the hunting team did not stay for long. They hurried to leave with the prey. Anyway, it was late and they had to go back to the cave. Caesar stopped looking. Let's go. Xiao Xian saw Caesar was still looking back, so he shouted. After taking one last look at the wolves in the distance, Caesar followed Xiao Xian and ran back to the cave of the first stronghold. At night, the warriors were barbecuing meat and chatting in the cave. The entrance of the cave was blocked by a big stone, and the wind could only come in through some gaps and openings. Ever since the incident with the thorn-black wind, Mai had found this cave as his new base. While they were chatting, Mai suddenly stopped talking. The others also stopped talking and listened carefully. There was the sound of wolves howling. It was not very close and people with bad hearing might not have noticed it. However, the warriors here had much better hearing than others. Is it the same pack we saw during the day? Tu whispered. Now Tu and Jieba had both joined Mai's hunting team. This was their third hunt. Their appearance did not change much, but their aura had changed a lot. They were no longer the two kids who lived in the cave and thought about what to eat the next day. They were real warriors. Be careful tomorrow. It's probably a new wolf group. As for the old ones, they must have been defeated. Mai said. There was an overlapping area between the territories of the wolf groups. It was possible to see wolves from two groups, but this was not their overlapping area. But now, the wolves at the foot of the mountain were openly showing their presence. Obviously, the old ones were either defeated or dead. While the others were talking about the new wolves, Caesar kept staring out of the cave. Noticing Caesar's look, Xiaoxian thought that he had to keep a close eye on this guy for a while. Chapter 127. The next day, the hunting group saw the pack of wolves in the giant antler deer's territory. Yesterday they were too far away to see clearly, but today they carefully observed the wolves. The wolves in this pack did not look much different, but they were bigger than the wolves in the previous packs, and their fur was also different. The fur of these wolves was patterned, and there were some darker spots near their backs. After coming to the forest, Xiaoxian had seen many wolves with different fur colors. According to Mai, there were some special packs and the pattern was the symbol of their pack. If the pattern was different, it might be a foreign wolf, not a member of the original pack. Xiaoxian had never seen this pack of wolves before, but it did not mean that Mai and the others had never seen it before. Why do I feel that this pack of wolves is very familiar? A warrior said. I think so too. I have seen this pattern before. We met them when we were hunting a cave bear at the edge of the hunting route. Mai recalled. At that time they met a huge cave bear which was injured. It seemed that it had fought with other ferocious beasts, and Mai and the others took the opportunity to kill it. But even though the cave bear was injured, it was still very difficult to deal with. The hunting group chased it for a long time until they were almost out of the hunting route and finally killed it. At that time they happened to encounter a battle between two packs of wolves. One pack of wolves slaughtered another pack of wolves. It was a real cruel slaughter. Not only were the wolves bitten to death, but many of the dead wolves had been bitten and gnawed beyond recognition. The ground was covered with blood, and scavenger birds were hovering in the sky. When Mai led the hunting group to kill the cave bear, the slaughter was already over. Only a few wolves were still lingering around, dragging and biting the dead wolves on the ground. When the hunting group showed up, they were already full, and there were wounded wolves in the pack, so they were not in the mood to deal with the hunting group, and the leader of the pack left with the rest of the wolves. And it was there that Lang Jie picked up Caesar, who was still a cub at that time. Caesar was the only surviving wolf in the wolf pack that was completely slaughtered. Probably because he was playful at that time, he went a little further away. There was a steep slope not far from the wolf's den, and he rolled down the slope. At that time, the wolves guarding the den might have noticed the appearance of other wolves. They were only focused on being vigilant and did not pay attention to Caesar until the end of the massacre. When Mai brought people over, Caesar, who had rolled down the slope and was lying under a rock, had just woken up from his coma. He kept howling, and only then did Lang Jie notice him. Otherwise, if he didn't make a sound, no one would have noticed him under the cover of the rocks, tall grass and steep slope. Fortunately, the other wolf pack did not deliberately search for the scent of the pups at the edge of the steep slope. I remember when I picked up Caesar, he was only this big. Lang Jie raised his hand and gestured. He even wanted to bite me with his teeth that were not fully grown yet. Recalling the past, Lang Jie and the others could not help but smile. Caesar was indeed not big at that time, but soon everyone's heart sank. Obviously, those who had witnessed the massacre together with Mai and Lang Jie were not happy about it. It was not that they were sentimental. As warriors who had hunted in this forest for many years, they had seen many such battles. Moreover, as hunting warriors, who had not killed wild beasts and ferocious beasts, could soft-hearted people survive here? It was impossible. The reason why they felt uncomfortable was that when they thought of that scene, they knew how cruel that wolf pack was. It could even be counted as torture. Unless you kill them all, otherwise don't mess with those guys, especially you guys. Mai looked at the new members and said. Everyone nodded quickly. There were new members in the hunting team this year. As new members, It was easy for them to attract the attention of the carnivorous wild beasts and ferocious beasts in the forest. They loved to attack the weak. What Xiaoxian had experienced, they had to experience it again. Xian, keep an eye on Caesar. Mai whispered to Xiaoxian. I know. Xiaoxian had the same idea. After that, during the hunt, Xiaoxian kept an eye on Caesar. Seeing that Caesar was still the same as usual, he was relieved. After killing a giant clawed beast, several people in the hunting team began to deal with the prey. Lang Jie checked the surrounding traps and asked Xiaoxian to help him fix them. The auxiliary role of traps could not be ignored. Seeing that Caesar was lying not far away, Xiaoxian walked over to help Lang Jie fix the traps. Lang Jie, when you picked up Caesar, did he see the miserable situation of the wolf pack? Xiaoxian asked. Lang Jie thought carefully. Yes, I did. I picked him up from the bottom of the slope and put him on the ground. He sniffed around and howled. He even bit the 2 dead wolves with spots on them. His little teeth were not fully grown, so he could not even bite through the wolf's skin. After slaughtering one wolf pack, the other wolf pack was not completely unscathed. They lost 2 wolves. However, compared to Caesar's wolf pack, which was almost completely wiped out, this was nothing. The wolves with spots on their fur were very strong. Compared to other wolves, they had a stronger bite force. They were ferocious and often killed other wolf packs and attacked other beast packs. Seeing Xiaoxian frown, Lang Jie smiled and said, You're not worried that Caesar will hold a grudge, are you? How old was he at that time? That's impossible. As he spoke, Lang Jie looked up at Caesar, who was not far away. Seeing that he was looking at them, Lang Jie lowered his head and continued to fix the traps. Every time they fixed the traps, Caesar would lie down not far away and watch Lang Jie and Xiaoxian fix the traps. I didn't expect you to keep him. I was going to cook soup for you. When he thought about how Caesar had almost been cooked, Lang Jie could not help but feel happy and emotional. Xiaoxian was listening to Lang Jie describe what he had seen when he suddenly heard a cry of alarm. Alert! Everyone be careful! It's a wolf pack! Xiaoxian suddenly stood up and looked around. Caesar, who had been lying there just now, was gone. Mai nervously paid attention to the movements of the wolves. The pack of wolves had already formed an encirclement, but soon Mai discovered that Caesar had rushed out. He did not fight directly, but instead, he took a bite of the wolf at the side and ran away. Mai could feel that the wolves had originally wanted to attack them, but their target was not Caesar. However, after seeing Caesar, the wolves hesitated for a moment. Under the command of the alpha wolf, they changed their target and chased after Caesar. During normal hunting, Caesar would help attract the attention of the prey, but that was all planned. The prey was not such a threatening wolf pack. Why would Caesar suddenly rush out? Xian, hurry up and call Caesar back. Mai quickly looked around and did not see Xiaoxian's figure. His face turned green. Where's Xian? Lang Jie jumped out from the tall grass, panting. I didn't catch him. He had seen Xiaoxian leave just now, so he immediately chased after him. He wanted to stop him, but unexpectedly, he was left behind after a short distance. He could not even find his shadow, so he had to go back first. That guy, he's too fast. Lang Jie had never thought that he would lose his target so soon, even though he was already a mid-level totem warrior and could move fast in the team. Mai took a deep breath and then looked at the young warriors. You go back to the cave first. Qiao, take them away. After that, Mai led the warriors into the woods and went in the direction that Lang Jie had pointed out. On the other side, Xiaoxian followed the traces on the ground and chased after Xiaoxian. Caesar had probably discovered the wolves' movement before Mai, so he moved very quickly. Perhaps he had been waiting for an opportunity, or he would not have rushed out so decisively. After all, Xiaoxian had been a little late, so now he could not see the wolves at all. He could only follow the traces on the ground and around. He had not noticed it before, but now he realized that these wolves were really fast. Xiaoxian was worried. Caesar had almost no chance of winning against the wolves, and the probability of him escaping was not high. Lang Jie said that Caesar did not hold grudges, but Xiaoxian believed that Caesar remembered. As for how much he remembered, Xiaoxian did not know. While chasing, Xiaoxian looked in the direction where the wolves were running, and he had an idea. In the middle of the first and second strongholds, there was a remote area near the mountains. Usually there were not many ferocious beasts going there. But there Lang Jie and Xiao Xian had set up a trap belt together. When hunting they might encounter some trouble, and these traps in remote areas were to deal with such situations in case of emergency. If they encountered some ferocious beasts or wild beasts that were difficult to deal with, the hunters would run towards the trap belt, and let the traps hinder the ferocious beasts, so that the hunters would have more time to escape. In the past, the traps were mainly set up by Lang Ga. Later, when they were mending them, Xiao Xian and Lang Jie studied them together, and made some improvements. Because they were designed to guard against ferocious beasts, they were naturally designed with the ability to injure or even kill. These traps had to be checked every time they went hunting. This time they came to check them on the first day, and Caesar watched them mending them. Wherever the wolves passed, many wild beasts would avoid them. Some ferocious beasts were also afraid of causing trouble, so they avoided them. This also made it easier for Xiao Xian to catch up. In the direction of the trap belt, there were already screams. Xiao Xian sped up again. When Xiao Xian arrived at the trap belt, what he saw was a sunken pit. There were thorns in the pit, and a wolf was lying in it. The thorns inside did not pierce through it, but as it struggled, the thorns pierced deeper and deeper, causing more and more blood to flow out. The thorns were smeared with a kind of grass juice with an anesthetic effect. As the thorns pierced deeper, its struggling became weaker and weaker. If no one pulled it out, it would not be long before it died. Xiao Xian did not care about it and went straight through it. Not far from the pit, a wolf was hung in the air by its neck. The more it struggled, the tighter the rope became. This kind of rope was also specially soaked in the blood of wild beasts and grass juice, and was very strong. The wolf hung in the air could only struggle. It wanted to bite off the rope, but it failed again and again. When Xiao Xian saw it, its neck was already a little deformed. When Xiao Xian passed by, he gave it a stab. The wolf hung in the air, no longer moving. Not only were there pits and nooses, but there were also nets, knife stakes, and a series of other traps. Every once in a while, Xiao Xian would see a wolf that was dead or still struggling. There were spots on their backs. Xiao Xian chased them all the way and stabbed them all the way. If there was no time to deal with them, he directly threw spear darts or stone needles. Even if they did not die, they could still injure them. Chapter 128. The range of the trap zone was not too large, but there were many wolves trapped there. Xiao Xian saw at least 7 wolves trapped or dead in the traps. Obviously, when the wolves were chasing after Caesar, they did not expect that Caesar would bring them to such a place. When Caesar ran here, they did not have time to react. Seeing that nothing happened to Caesar, they naturally did not think that there were so many hidden dangers here. Normally, there would not be so many wolves trapped. There were many experienced animals in the forest, and their intuition could provide them with preliminary judgment. Naturally, there were also wolves with rich hunting experience. Today was just an accident, and they were chasing closely, so they did not think too much. After passing through the trap zone, Xiao Xian continued to follow the tracks. Not far from the trap zone there was a natural asphalt pit. This was also the largest asphalt pit on the hunting route of the first stronghold. Every day many animals, both terrestrial and flying, would be trapped in it. Xiao Xian once saw a cow trapped in it. The cow could not break free, and it attracted many carnivores. As a result, all of them were swallowed by the asphalt pit. No one knew how many skeletons were buried in the asphalt pit. There was also a small asphalt pit near the tribe. Xiao Xian once saw people take asphalt from there to build roofs, but for safety reasons, the tribe often had people in charge of guarding there. In the large asphalt pit in front of him, Xiao Xian saw 2 wolves trapped in it. 1/3 of their legs had sunk in, and they were struggling futilely. If no one pulled them out, they would gradually sink into the pit and accompany the animals that had been trapped for thousands of years or even longer. There they would not be eaten by scavengers, and their bones would be well preserved. In the distant future their bones might see the light of day again. But it was also possible that they would be buried forever. Generally speaking, smart animals would not come close to this place. Those that came close were either not very smart, new, or greedy predators. In this asphalt pit zone it looked dark, but in fact not every part of it would sink. The hunting team was more familiar with this place and had passed through it before. Sometimes, in order to avoid some troublesome ferocious beasts or groups of wild animals, they would take refuge here. The passage was very narrow, and large ferocious beasts could not pass through it. Xiao Xian brought Caesar here once, and did not expect it to remember it. There were its footprints and some other wolves' footprints. Caesar was not the only one who was smart. However, there were still 2 wolves trapped in it. The wolves had just come to this land, and were not familiar with it. They might have seen asphalt pits in their former territory, and only knew that it was dangerous, which was their natural alertness. Here they did not know where they could go and where they could not go. Xiao Xian saw some footprints around the asphalt pit, and those that did not follow Caesar's route were trapped in it. It would take too much time to take a detour, so Xiao Xian directly went through the asphalt pit zone, and did not pay attention to the 2 wolves that were trapped deeper and deeper. From some traces, it could be seen that Caesar had left most of the wolves behind, and trapped nearly 10 of them, through the previous trap zone and the asphalt pit zone. The wolf pack, which had about 30 members, was reduced by 1/3 in a short time. If the alpha wolf was timid, it probably would not continue to chase, but obviously, the wolves in this pack were all ferocious and very vengeful and kept chasing. Until now, there were only about 3 or 4 wolves that were chasing closely. Most of them did not keep up, and Xiao Xian had encountered a few along the way. Following Xiao Xian, Caesar learned a lot of tricks to trap people and beasts, such as traps, asphalt pits, and how to run into the territory of ferocious beasts, and transfer the hatred to the wolves that were chasing closely behind. The only thing this new pack of wolves lacked was their unfamiliarity with this place. However, Xiao Xian was worried that Caesar might be injured. As he followed along, he saw blood on the ground. The blood could be from the wolves or it could be from Caesar. Xiao Xian needed to find him as soon as possible and confirm his injury. While running, Xiao Xian suddenly heard a loud roar in the forest ahead. Many birds that were resting in the forest flapped their wings and flew up, and some small animals ran out. A giant bear. Besides that, Xiao Xian also heard the howling of wolves. It was not Caesar's howling, but the howling of the wolves from the other pack. There was a giant bear with them, and it was much more difficult to deal with than the 4-fanged boar. It looked clumsy, but it ran very fast. The hunting team had been avoiding it from a distance. In the past, the hunting team had encountered the giant bear several times, and were chased by it. Whenever they encountered it, the hunting team would run towards the asphalt pit. However, the giant bear was not stupid. Every time it chased them to the edge of the asphalt pit, it would stop moving forward, and then slowly walk around the asphalt pit. When it walked, it would roar at the hunting team and stare at them fiercely, as if it was telling them, sooner or later, I will eat you. But now, in order to deal with the wolves, Caesar had provoked the giant bear. If he was not careful, he would get himself into trouble. Xiao Xian's face changed, and he hurried towards the bear. The giant bear was still roaring. Soon Xiao Xian saw the giant figure standing up, with its mouth wide open, showing its sharp teeth, and roaring towards a place on the ground. Following the giant bear's sight, Xiao Xian saw 4 wolves. The obviously bigger one was the alpha of the pack. These 4 wolves were the only ones that had chased Xiao Xian to this place. Some of the wolves were trapped in the asphalt pit, and some had not caught up. Among the 4 wolves, 3 of them, including the alpha, had bloodstains around their mouths. After looking around, Xiao Xian did not see Caesar. Beside the giant bear, there was a wolf with a spotted pattern on its back, but its neck had been bitten off by the giant bear. The alpha wolf did not seem to want to give up. It bared its teeth and growled at the giant bear. This made the giant bear, which was the king of this area, immediately angry. Usually, it was very annoyed by hunting groups that came to its territory to hunt. Every time it could not catch up with anyone, so it was very angry. This time it did not see anyone, but it saw these strange wolves. It should be known that the wolves that lived in this area did not dare to come to its territory and be arrogant. With another roar, the giant bear vented its anger. Seeing that the situation was not good, the alpha wolf had to give up the chase. It turned around and ran, and the other 3 wolves quickly followed. The giant bear on all 4s chased after the alpha wolf. Xiao Xian knew the bear's temper. It would probably chase for a while before it returned. Seeing that the wolves and the giant bear had left, Xiao Xian jumped down from the tree and carefully identified the smell in the air. There were a few prey that the giant bear had hunted here. The smell of blood was very strong, and some scavengers began to move again. Xiaoxian looked around and changed his vision. The surrounding green vegetation disappeared, and all he could see were stones, faint silhouettes of trees, and some animal skeletons. His vision stopped at one place and Xiaoxian quickly walked there. Changing back to his normal vision, Xiaoxian came to a plant with large leaves. Under the large leaves, blood flowed out. Pushing the leaves aside, Xiaoxian saw Caesar lying under the leaves. Caesar's condition was very bad. When he used his special vision, Xiaoxian found that there were several fractures on its body. In addition to the fractures, there were also some bite wounds. 2 of them were very deep, and large pieces of meat had been bitten off. Blood kept flowing out. There was also blood flowing out of Caesar's mouth. Its internal organs were probably damaged as well. Xiaoxian quickly took out a bag of herbs. Inside were some herbs that had been ground into powder. He sprinkled it on Caesar's wounds. After the powder was sprinkled, it was quickly soaked in blood. This couldn't go on. In his previous life, such a situation would have been immediately sent to the emergency room. However, in this kind of place, other than the limited amount of herbs he had on him, Xiaoxian had no other choice. If this continued, Caesar would soon stop breathing. Xiaoxian could feel that Caesar's breathing had become difficult. Sensing Xiaoxian's arrival, Caesar opened its eyes and moved. It wanted to get up, but Xiaoxian quickly stopped it. "Hey buddy, don't move. You're injured." It was only a slight movement, but the blood that had just slowed down flowed out again. Along with the powder, it dripped onto the ground. Hearing Xiaoxian's words, Caesar no longer struggled to get up. It lay on the ground, but it moved its head and used its nose to touch Xiaoxian's hand. It even let out a whimper. Don't cry." Xiaoxian raised his hand and gently patted Caesar's head. Although Caesar didn't cry, Xiaoxian could see the sadness in its eyes. Probably knew that its condition wasn't good. They couldn't just wait here. Should they carry Caesar back to the cave? That was impossible. Caesar's injuries were too serious. It couldn't withstand the jolts, and it might not be able to last that long. Looking around, Xiaoxian took out a bag of herbs. It wasn't for external application. There were some leaves inside. Xiaoxian put it in Caesar's mouth. It just closed its mouth and didn't have the strength to chew. Xiaoxian quickly crushed the herbs with the back of his knife and poured them into a gourd filled with water. Then, he mixed it with water and poured some into Caesar's mouth. He didn't know how effective these herbs would be for Caesar, but he had to try. After feeding Caesar the medicine, Xiaoxian patted Caesar's head and said, "Hang in there, buddy. I'll be back soon." He put down the big leaf again to cover Caesar's figure. The scavenging birds and beasts wouldn't notice them for a while. The giant bear still had a lot of food left. Xiaoxian found a few sticks and vines to make a simple stretcher. Then he came back and put Caesar on it. He carried the stretcher and walked away. There was a very large tree nearby. Xiaoxian planned to put Caesar up the tree first. The giant bear would be back soon. They couldn't stay in the same place for too long. Moreover, the sky was gradually darkening. It was relatively safer in the tree. He found a long and sturdy vine and tied it to the stretcher. Xiaoxian stood on a branch of the tree. He wrapped the other end of the vine around another branch above his head and pulled Caesar's stretcher up. Just as Xiaoxian pulled Caesar up the tree, the giant bear that was chasing the wolves had returned to its original place. Seeing a group of scavenging birds and beasts fighting over its prey, the giant bear roared angrily and rushed over. It tore a few beasts that couldn't escape in time into pieces. The surrounding birds and beasts scattered in an instant. After confirming that there were no other birds and beasts nearby, the giant bear continued to eat. Chapter 129. The light of the sun gradually disappeared, and 2 moons appeared in the sky above the forest. Some nocturnal animals gradually came out, and most of the birds flew back to their nests. There were many bird nests above the branch Xiaoxian was on, but Xiaoxian would not take the initiative to provoke those birds. These birds did not look big and looked quite pleasant, but in fact they were very dangerous. If it was a seriously injured animal or a recently dead animal, they would swarm over and start a feast. There were birds fighting above. and a bird fell from its nest and landed on the branch Xiaoxian was standing on. Turning over and shaking its wings, the bird looked at Xiaoxian. At night, its vision was not good, but its sense of smell was very sensitive. It smelled the blood on Caesar's body, and also felt that Caesar was weak. The bird, which was about to shake its wings and fly back to its nest, changed its mind and rushed in Caesar's direction. Some fine sharp teeth could be seen in its open mouth, and the edges of its beak were serrated. With each bite, a piece of meat would be scraped off. When the bird flew over, Xiaoxian quickly took a step forward and stabbed with his right hand holding the stone knife. The bird, which was excited by the smell of blood and completely ignored Xiaoxian, suddenly felt the dark clouds of death rise in its heart. In the next moment, Xiaoxian's stone knife penetrated the bird's body. Without looking at the bird again, Xiaoxian swung his arm and threw the bird on the stone knife to the tree trunk. At the end of the branch there was a hole in the trunk, and the hole was emitting a sparkling green light. When Xiaoxian threw the bird over, a mouth instantly opened at the entrance of the tree hole and swallowed the bird directly, then retracted back into the hole. The sparkling green light continued to flash, attracting some nocturnal insects to fly here and eat them. It was a kind of tree worm that lived in trees. During the day, it looked no different from other worms, but at night, its body would emit fluorescent light to hunt for food. There were still many birds watching from the tree. If Caesar was left here alone, he would be reduced to bones in a few minutes. These birds were just not active at night, but they would still move and eat. They would not let go of any weak animals. Xiaoxian did not sleep. In the forest at night, even if he stayed in the trees, it was only a little safer. There were still many dangers in the trees, so he had to be vigilant at all times. When Xiaoxian was looking for vines to make a stretcher, he found a few herbs and gave them to Caesar. However, the effect was not good. As time passed, Caesar's condition was still deteriorating. After all, Caesar was not a totemic warrior. If he had the recovery ability of a totemic warrior, he would be able to hold on for a while. Many totemic warriors could hold on until they were sent to the tribe. However, Caesar was just an ordinary wolf. His congenital condition determined that he could not become a stronger beast or even a ferocious beast in a short period of time. In terms of physical fitness, he was not even comparable to most of the wolves in the new wolf pack. His recovery ability was limited. Xiaoxian could not change this. Thinking of this, Xiaoxian could not help but sigh in his heart, feeling a little sad. After all, he had not been in this world for long before he started to raise Caesar. More than 2 years. Thinking of this, Xiaoxian suddenly froze. Recovery? Yes, recovery. Caesar's recovery ability was not impossible to change. As long as Caesar could turn from an ordinary beast into a ferocious beast, even if he could not become a ferocious beast, as long as his overall ability was improved, he could last longer. And one way to turn Caesar from an ordinary beast into a ferocious beast in a short period of time was the secret engraving technique recorded in the ancient scroll. According to the ancient teachings, the target who used the secret engraving technique had strict requirements. As for Caesar, first he could follow the hunting and second his loyalty was good. Even if he did not completely meet the requirements of the ancestors, Xiaoxian decided to give it a try. Xiaoxian was not absolutely sure about the secret engraving technique, so he had not used it on Caesar. But now, except for this, there was no other choice. If he tried, he could fail or succeed. If he failed, Caesar would not see the sun tomorrow. If he succeeded, Caesar would live. But if he did not try, Caesar would definitely die. Hey buddy, Xiaoxian touched Caesar's wolf head. There is a way to save you. If it succeeds, you will become more powerful, and you may even become a ferocious beast. If it fails, you can only say goodbye to this world. Caesar opened his eyes and wanted to touch Xiaoxian's hand with his nose, but he had no strength. He could only open his eyes and look at Xiaoxian. Gusts of night wind blew and the branches swayed. Some weak moonlight penetrated through the gaps between the leaves and shone into Caesar's eyes. The reflected light made the wolf's eyes look a little scary, like 2 flashing lights. In the forest, many animals' eyes at night looked like this. Xiaoxian was not afraid. He raised his hand and touched Caesar's wolf head. Okay, as long as you agree. Hold on, buddy. Old Ku is still waiting at home. There are still a bunch of cubs in the tribe waiting for you to teach them a lesson. Without you they may not last long and will be cooked. And the wolves that killed your tribe are still alive. Do you want to continue taking revenge? The engraving secret technique was not only the will of the caster, but also the will of the receiver. If the receiver was willing to accept it, the success rate would be higher. If there was a conflict between the two, the possibility of failure would be higher. Even if it succeeded, the effect would not be good. The ferocious beasts created might rebel. This was also why the ancestors would rather choose fewer ferocious beasts and choose the most loyal of them. Caesar's current state was not good for the engraving secret technique, but in order to increase the possibility of success, Xiao Xian wanted to arouse his desire to live. The potential in a desperate situation was unpredictable. That was why there were sayings such as fighting back and being reborn from the ashes. After a few words with Caesar, Xiao Xian did not delay any longer. While Caesar was still awake, he started. He made a simple fence with rattan to prevent other small beasts from interfering. Xiao Xian did not know what kind of changes the engraving secret technique would cause, but here he was willing to take the risk. Handing the stone knife to his left hand, Xiao Xian squatted down and stretched out his right hand in front of Caesar. Carefully recalling the records in the ancient scroll and his daily practice, Xiao Xian began to mobilize the power of inheritance in his body. In the sea of consciousness at the bottom of the totem flame, near the two horns, the blue flame gradually increased, and a trace of blue separated from it. At the same time, under Xiao Xian's right palm, the trace of blue began to form the shape of two horns. It was not just a flat figure, but a three-dimensional totem shape, far smaller than the one in the tribe's fire pit. It was only the size of a walnut. The two horns gradually formed. When the engraving was completed, some blue flames began to gather around the horns. Then above the blue flames, a red flame began to appear. During this process, Xiao Xian did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. The slightest mistake could cause the engraving to fail and the totem to scatter. When the red flame finally appeared and stabilized, Xiao Xian was slightly relieved. This proved that the engraving of the totem by the power of inheritance was successful. But this was only the beginning. After the engraving, it was time for the imprinting. After the totem was completed, Xiao Xian moved his palm and pressed it on Caesar's forehead. The totem moved with Xiao Xian's hand. When it touched Caesar's forehead, it did not immediately imprint. Xiao Xian felt resistance in his hand, but he was not worried. According to the ancient scroll, there would be a lot of resistance in the process of imprinting. After all, he was not a member of the tribe, not even a human. Naturally, there would be some resistance. Without stopping, Xiao Xian continued to slowly imprint the totem. He could not rush, but he could not be too slow either. He had to control his own speed. The ancient scroll did not explain it clearly, so Xiao Xian could only rely on his intuition. As Xiao Xian's palm pressed down, the two-horn totem was slowly imprinted on Caesar's forehead. With his palm on Caesar's forehead, Xiao Xian did not immediately withdraw his hand after completely imprinting the totem. Instead, he helped to guide the flow of totem power in Caesar's body. Caesar still had consciousness, so he began to follow Xiao Xian's guidance and began to mobilize this new power. It knew what this was. Every year at the end of winter, when the tribe held a sacrificial ceremony, it would feel this power. However, the difference was that it had avoided this power the last two times, but now it felt close to it. When Caesar's consciousness began to take control, Xiao Xian withdrew his hand. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he looked around. If there had been a beast or a ferocious beast, he would have failed. Fortunately, there was no movement for now. Looking at Caesar lying on the branch, Xiao Xian could only help here. In the secret technique of engraving, this was all he could do. The rest was up to Caesar. If he could master and accept this power, he would have succeeded. If he could not, he would not be able to hold on for long with such injuries. Soon, Xiao Xian noticed that Caesar was trembling. The more he shook, the more his whole body began to twitch. Puff! Caesar spat out blood directly onto Xiao Xian's body. Crack! 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 With the crisp sound of bones, Caesar's whole body swelled up. It was only his bones that held it up. His fur clung to his bones, making him look like a bag of bones. What happened? Xiao Xian looked at the scene in front of him in shock. The ancient scroll did not mention such a reaction. It only said that after the hounds and totems merged successfully, they would grow into beasts that were stronger than other beasts in a short period of time. The stronger ones would even become ferocious beasts. But the short period of time mentioned in the ancient scroll did not mean a few minutes or hours, but dozens of days. But now, after only a few minutes of engraving, Caesar's body began to change. Xiao Xian did not know if it was the same as what the ancestors said. There were no detailed records of this. Xiao Xian had been paying attention to Caesar's condition. The broken bones had reformed and were bigger. He did not know how the internal injuries were. The 2 wounds on his body that had lost large chunks of flesh had stopped bleeding. One of the wounds could even be seen protruding bone. Although the changes in front of him were beyond Xiao Xian's expectations, and were different from what the ancestors said in the ancient scroll, Xiao Xian could feel that Caesar's vitality was getting stronger. Although the process was not as obvious as the changes on the surface, it was indeed a good sign. Above, the birds that had been watching Xiao Xian and Caesar, waiting for an opportunity to sneak attack, shrank back into their nests and hid. They no longer looked down and pretended to be quails. In the tree hole, the glowing green tree worm also crawled into the depths of the hole. Even the fluorescence on its body had dimmed. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.